she printed everything. You know, I'm good. Woo. Good evening. It is 5:35. I would like to call to order the meeting of the Expanded Access to Arts and Culture Subcommittee. Can you please conduct a roll call, City Clerk?
Chair McCoy? Vice Chair Ward?
Present.
What happened? And we will now move on to the Pledge of Allegiance. Will everyone please stand? Ready? Salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible. Thank you. Are there any changes to the agenda or proposed changes to the agenda, City Clerk?
A supplemental packet has been added to the agenda items ID 26618, ID 26619, and ID 26620.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the amended agenda?
I make a motion to approve the amended agenda.
Thank you. I second it. All in favor say aye. Aye. I must say this feels weird because normally we have a full commission and it's just us two. We're going to move on to the approval of minutes. Are there any changes or proposed changes to the minutes from April 15th, 2026?
There are no changes.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the April 15th, 2026 meeting.
And April 20. Do I have to do them separate or can I do them together? Because we have to approve the minutes for April 15th and April 29th. Okay, so both of them.
And also on the second meeting.
I second it to approve the minutes from April 15th and April 29th, 2026. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. This item is approved. We will now move on to member comments. Vice Chair Ward, do you have any comments for this commission?
Yeah, my member comment is I wanted to thank the park staff for posting all of the listening session videos and all the comments that were received. I was able to watch everything and read everything. I noticed that comment 294 had an inaccuracy about me. I am not the legal counsel for the Fresno Arts Council. My law firm is not ever been engaged to be legal counsel for the Fresno Arts Council. I believe they work with Jackson Waste from Fenimore, and I just wanted to put that on the record. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a comment. I would like to invite you all out this Saturday to an exciting event. I'm bringing out my colleague, Dr. Bruce Strobel, all the way out here from Tallahassee, Florida. He has written 3 books, and he's going to come and talk to us today about community solutions that empower community into activism, power building, proven tools and methods to take power and grow it, and lastly, strategies for the future, forward-thinking strategies to meet the challenges of the 21st century. So if you guys are all available, lunch will be served from 11 a.m. to 12:45 p.m., and then the program will begin from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m., and it will be held at our Fresno City College, the main campus in the old administration building, and you guys are all welcome, and it's free. And I have Sarah put some flyers out there by our supplement documents. Thank you. Does anyone from the park staff have any comments for the subcommittee?
No comments, thank you.
Thank you. We will now move on to unscheduled communication. Unscheduled communication, would any other member of the public like to speak on any issue within the jurisdiction of the subcommittee? You will have up to 3 minutes. If you would like to make a comment regarding a scheduled hearing, comments will be taken when the hearing is called. And I do have some cards up here. First card I have is Kyle Smits. Go ahead.
And just don't throw my card away because I wanted to speak on the other item too. On unscheduled, I just wanted to mention Kyle Schmidt, South Tower Community Land Trust. From round 2, we never received our contract from Fresno Arts Council. And recently we did receive some communications from the Parks Department and the EAC email around kind of opening up the process and getting us our contract. We did attend the technical assistance session. It is a pretty murky process where, there's like a SharePoint account that we created, but there's not really a clear flow of activity to the point that we get a contract. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that there could be some clearer graphics or like a flow chart of what are the steps to get to the point where we have a contract. So just wanted to highlight that we're kind of given this SharePoint where we're supposed to upload documents, but it's a little murky exact what steps we're supposed to get to the point where we do have a contract. So just wanted to highlight that for the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else in the chamber who would like to speak during unscheduled communication? If you would have comments regarding any of the hearings on the agenda, please make those comments during the hearing. And can you please fill out a card afterwards, please? You can do it after. Sorry.
My name is Omer Lopez, Dulce up front. I wasn't here the last time, but I wanted to ask why the gentleman that was part of the subcommittee is no longer part of the subcommittee. I also wanted to make a request. I think it was also mentioned in the comment section, but that there should be others on the subcommittee, the EAC subcommittee, that are reflective of the arts and cultural community here in the city of Fresno. I believe that there should be working artists and working cultural bearers that are also seated here, and I would hope that that would be done swiftly. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone online?
Yes, we do. Johannes, please unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, subcommittee. As always, keeping my feedback about the grant guidelines to their proper spots on the agenda. I want to speak once more up to the ordinance of Measure P. Again, Section 7-1506, subsection 4-A. That's that line that the grant shall be made available on an annual basis. I still have a lot of concerns about this rush to the June 30th arbitrary deadline. It does not fit the language of the ordinance, and it does not fit what this city has already done. And I know that it's been said that this was the original legal opinion. I really want to ask, and I want to stress, if that opinion has been updated, if you have even asked for a follow-up legal opinion. Subsection 4-B has already been violated. Grants funded pursuant to this paragraph shall be implemented by the commission in partnership with the Fresno Arts Council or its successor local arts agency. That has been broken because of the illegal and the bad things that Fresno Arts Council did. Their contract was severed in violation of this ordinance. Obviously, that's acceptable because of extenuating circumstances. Those same extenuating circumstances have delayed this process, have made this intensive process of rewriting the guidelines necessary. And I appreciate the Parks Department for working weekends. Y'all are union, you shouldn't be doing that anyway. That shouldn't be necessary. The same way that the city of Fresno took over implementation of this grant for subsection 4-B, that should apply to subsection 4-A, like being able to like push or flex that annual basis. I also want to say that all of this does not exist in a vacuum. I know the subcommittee is aware of the illegal and discriminatory actions taken by Fresno County Board of Supervisors just a day ago against our libraries. Even if you could somehow pretend to defend the actions by county, you know that what they did explicitly reduced access to arts and culture. If you actively refuse to engage the community correctly, and if you release a half-baked grant guidelines, a half-baked grant program with so many holes that will hurt emerging organizations, you will make the city liable for lawsuits for discrimination, just like the county just made itself liable for lawsuits due to discrimination. You'll make our taxpayer dollars, our community, liable to lawsuits, and we don't want that. Please reconsider the June 30th deadline. It would fit within Measure P and the extenuating circumstances to extend it. Just do it right, please. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Munira. Please unmute yourself.
Good afternoon. Yes, my name is Munira Dinkani, aka Miss DJ Moonshine, and I'm just here in representation of the fiscally sponsored projects. And I just want to say, in regards to the process, in regards to getting that last 10%, is really unclear on how to get that last 10%. I did go on the web, the fiscally sponsored, and that parks, that is the actual area we're going to go over today, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I'll speak more on that one at that time, but I just wanted to highlight in regards to the projects and getting the full amount of money in an easier manner, and then to understand that some of these contracts aren't as accessible because they weren't sent directly to us, and submittable is not very user friendly.
Thank you. Next, I have Stony Dodson. You have 3 minutes to speak on unscheduled communications.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Stony Dodson. I'm here on behalf of Urban Powwow Drum and Dance, and we're one of the fiscally sponsored programs that has yet to receive any funds, and truthfully to receive any sort of communication. I just wanted to express a deep concern and disappointment that government, specifically local government, is marginalizing and truthfully looking past the Native community in this situation and circumstance. And through the process, I can speak for our organization that it's disappointing that we're losing faith in the support and the truth to whether or not if this is truly expanded access, if we're really living by those terms and living by that, if we're acting by that message and that belief. With that, I wanted to express an option for a consideration for our program in particular, that throughout this whole process of Measure P being handed over to the parks, that we've continued our programming regardless of having funds. We've met our deliverables. And we would like to request that we are able to close out our program, given that we've met all our deliverables, met all of our requirements, without ever receiving any funds and or communication. And so again, I'm here on behalf of Urban Powwow Drum and Dance, and just thank you for the time and thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Next, I have Maggie Cortez. You have 3 minutes.
Oh, thank you very much. So my only concern is I'm just wondering what the dates are that applications for the upcoming cycle will be available and when those will be due. And the reason I ask is because I'm with Scarab Creative Arts, and we would like to offer for the public free workshops to help people facilitate writing their grants. So I don't know what timeline I'm looking at.
Thank you. This is for unscheduled communications. Comments regarding a scheduled hearing comments will be taken when the hearing is called. And next I have Alicia Alexandra on Zoom. Please unmute yourself when you're ready.
Hi, I'm Alicia, and I am the Strategic Planning Officer for Breakbox Thought Collective. I just want to reemphasize the statement that was made earlier that the process, we joined some of the other meetings. We're awarded and never received any funding. Email after email, no response. The communication has been horrific. We haven't been given hardly any instruction in the webinar approach is not working. The in-person approach, the SharePoint is like hard to follow. We are college educated people and we can't figure out anything when it comes to what does the timeline look like, what's going on, and why the communication. There's been no apology. There's been no communication to follow up on all the questions that we've asked previously. So my question is basically just when is there going to be a clear outline of steps instead of being hand-fed something we were supposed to get in September?
Thank you. I have no more comments on Zoom.
Can you state your name, please?
Nikki. I just wanted to make sure everybody kind of knew that the Fresno Arts Council is still kind of in charge of that, basically is doing the same job they were doing before, right? Kind of. So, okay, I guess I have clarified, but I thought I saw something at the Board of Supervisors that they were still kind of appointed or in charge of some aspect, no? Okay.
No more comments on Zoom? Anyone in the chamber for unscheduled communication before I close it out? Want to be fair? Please fill out a card after you finish, please, and state your name. Okay.
And my name is Destiny Caraway. Good evening, everyone. My name is Destiny Caraway, and I'm here tonight representing a growing women's basketball organization built right here in Fresno, focused on empowerment, wellness, leadership, and community.
Ms. Destiny,
yes.
If she can make those comments under unscheduled communication. Okay, I just want to make sure you're making your comments under the right one, so I'll go ahead and restart your time. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. As I said, I'm here representing a growing women's basketball organization focused on empowerment, wellness, leadership, and community through sports. First, I want to sincerely thank this committee, the City of Fresno, and everyone in this room for creating opportunities for community voices and ideas to be heard. We truly appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm here because when we talk about expanded access to arts, culture, recreation, and community enrichment, athletics must also be included in that conversation. Basketball is culture, community recreation is culture, and for many women in Fresno, basketball provides far more than competition. It provides community, connection, stress relief, mentorship, wellness, leadership, and a safe, positive outlet. Women's Elite Hoops was created to provide more than basketball. We provide community, we provide wellness, we provide empowerment, we provide connection. Our league brings together women from all walks of life through Fresno. Mothers, college students, working professionals, veterans, former athletes, and women simply looking for healthy, structured, empowering spaces to gather, compete, and grow. And the response has been incredible. The engagement is there, the interest is there, the need is there, but the access is not. One of the biggest barriers preventing our organization from growing and serving our community more effectively is the lack of affordable, reliable, and consistent access to indoor gym space. Too often, we encounter limited gym availability, locked or overcrowded courts, inconsistent access to facilities, unreliable scheduling opportunities, and very few spaces intentionally available for adult women athletics. And while youth programming is incredibly important and absolutely deserves support, adult women recreations is often overlooked when access and investment decisions are being made. Tonight, we are not only here to raise awareness about that issue, we are here seeking partnership and solutions. Specifically, we are respectfully requesting immediate evening and weekend access within the next 30 days to a city-managed gym facility such as Frank H., Holmes, Maxi, or Malaga Rec Center. We are not here simply asking to rent a gym. We are here asking for partnership. We want to collaborate with the City of Fresno and the Parks Department to create organized, empowering, community-centered programming that directly benefits Fresno residents. We want to host leagues, wellness events, tournaments, youth mentorship opportunities, community engagement activities, and programs that encourage health, leadership, and positive connection for women and families throughout the city. We also welcome opportunities for sponsorship, promotional partnerships, and collaborative community outreach so we can continue expanding our impact. And we truly believe together we can serve our community 10 times better than we can separately. Because this is not just about basketball. This is about public health. This is about mental wellness. This is about safe spaces for women. This is about visibility. This is about culture. And this is about community investment. When women have positive spaces to gather, compete, build relationships, and stay active, entire communities benefit. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, I will close unscheduled communication and move on to discussion items. As a reminder, discussion items will be heard by the public. Opportunity to comment on the EAAC grant program Cycle 3 will be during the hearing portion of the meeting. Discussion item ID number 26-618, update on community engagement for the expanded access to arts and culture program. Will someone from the Parks Department begin the conversation?
Sorry. Good evening, Commissioner. Sarah Gaitan, with Program Manager with the Parks Department. I just wanted to identify a quick edit to this first slide here. It is not April 15th today. Today is May 13th.
Oh, and I just read it. I am so behind.
We are good. No, it's on the presentation. You didn't say it. It was just on there. But I'm going to be presenting an update on the community engagement for the Expanded Access to Arts and Culture program thus far. Our comment period for the Cycle 3 draft guidelines closed one day after our last subcommittee meeting, which was on April 13th. Altogether, we collected 760 total comments with an open period from April 15th to April 30th. We collected comments via online, 3 listening sessions, and 2 subcommittee meetings. Just like the last presentation that we had, we have compiled all of the comments and sorted them by sections. We received comments on 20 total sections of the guidelines, and of those 20 sections, we have highlighted the 3 that received the most comments. Those 3 topics were eligibility, fiscal sponsorship, and application review and scoring process. On April 29th, we also introduced the Applicant Scoring Committee Handbook. For this, we received 11 total comments. The comment period was April 29th through May 8th via online. Although not directly tied to the handbook, feedback on scoring was also collected as part of the listening sessions, which was used to build the handbook. So even though we had the 11 comments online, we did receive quite a bit through the other portal and the listening sessions. Here we have a recap of May. Tomorrow we will be publishing the agenda for the May 18th PRAC meeting. PRAC will have an opportunity to recommend guidelines for Cycle 3 during that meeting. And we will also use that meeting to establish a special PrAC meeting that last week of May, which will be discussed on the 18th. As a reminder, we are updating our website as frequently as possible. We have all upcoming meetings and previous recordings. We have comments made during our comment period. We have any documents related to the program on the website, and we've also added a new tab for Cycle 2 grantees with the resources they will be needing to proceed. And then we also have our area with info on how to contact us. And with that, I will open it up for any questions that you may have in regards to this.
I see that we need to establish a calendar for these meetings moving forward. Is there any need for us to change the way that the schedule is now? Bi-weekly, every other Wednesday?
Yes, so originally we had discussed potentially having the 27th, but we do not have access to the chambers or the other room. So I went ahead and tried for the next 2 weeks after that, and there's also some conflict with the room reservations because it's during the budget meetings. So I did send the proposed dates that we could potentially have during that week, or I wanted to see also if you guys were open to hosting the meeting at a community center where we could be available any of those days.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great idea. It may even draw in more community members.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you have a date in mind that you would like to set for the next meeting then?
I think I like how they're falling. So if we can schedule to get that meeting at a community center on the 27th, I would like to keep that date.
On the 27th, we do have a technical...
we have special meetings for the budget. Oh, let me pull out my calendar and look, because you didn't include a calendar for June. What about the fall? Oh, that's budget hearings, the following week.
There are, but what was conflicting was the room reservations, so...
Can we try for June 3rd?
Do you see anything on your calendar on that day? Okay. Okay.
And by then, we should have everything figured out, but let's try for June 3rd.
Okay.
Okay.
Alrighty. I will keep in communication with you.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I don't have any other questions. I could pass it to Vice Chair Ward.
No, that's fine. Just if you could let us know potential dates in advance, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay. Alrighty. Thank you.
We will now move on to discussion item ID number 26-619, discussion on the EAAC Cycle 3 Draft Grant Guideline Comment Review and Guideline Revision Review. Would someone from the Parks Department please begin the presentation?
I'll be giving this presentation. Shelby McNabb, Assistant Director, Parks Department. Just waiting for it to get up there. All right, thank you. So starting off, just as a reminder, the subcommittee formation and purpose. We will be following all Brown Act requirements, and the purpose of the subcommittee as outlined in the formation resolution is to assist and provide input and recommendations to the commission related to the expanded access grant guidelines. And then going to an overview of this presentation, the purpose of this presentation is to review the proposed updates to the draft guidelines based on the public comments that we received. As Sarah mentioned, we had 760 comments. Just some general notes as we head into that. I'll just note that a difference in opinion is expected and a welcome part of the process and reflects an engaged and diverse community. So thank you to all of you who had a chance to comment or attend a listening session. We appreciate all of the variety of opinions. I also like to make a comment that The process is an annual competitive process, so funding is not automatically guaranteed for any applicant. There are funds in the city or that the city receives through other programs that are what are called entitlement funds, but with this particular program, it is a competitive process as written into the ordinance. And then now is a good time to prepare to be eligible. So as we're working through the draft guidelines, that means obviously that things are fast approaching. So using the links that are in the current draft guidelines, if you're a nonprofit organization, you can already start to check and see if you're in good standing. We've linked within the draft online. You're able to click and go through the process to see. So now is a good time to do that, so that way you're not surprised once the notice of funding opportunity does get released. So we'll get into the public comments. Really the best way to share them was attaching them in their full glory, I guess you could say, on our website. So there is a PDF document that includes every single comment. If you'd like to review that. The process that we used to incorporate and review them, staff reviewed every comment that came through and then proceeded to make edits in the attached draft of the guidelines, which we'll be going over. If you were with us for our first subcommittee meeting, the process that I used for that was to go page by page and then pause for any input from the commissioners. So I believe we'll do that again. I think it was an effective way to make sure that everyone had a full understanding of what was included and could weigh in, allowing us to make any future edits. There are summaries of the comments that are included in the revised draft. And as you can imagine, there's a wide diversity of opinion. And so staff have put forth their best recommendation based on the comments received. And then we can work through that page by page. So we are going to jump into the annotated draft grant guidelines. For those of us online, that should appear on your screen. If you're in chambers, there's some copies in the back if you'd like to grab them. It's kind of hard to see at this distance, so there should be enough copies for you all back there. All right, ready, commissioners? Okay. On page 1, that's just an update to the table of contents, so that one's easy. Same for page 2, so we'll skip past those. On page 3, I've used red lines throughout where I made edits, so you can see that no edits were made to page 3. Moving on to page 4, same comment there. There were no edits made to that page of the guidelines, so we will go to page 5 where the edits really kind of begin. So there were many comments that the community would like to see funding go to artists directly. And I just want to re-emphasize that Measure P sets the requirements that grants be made to nonprofit organizations. So Measure P is the law, the Fresno Municipal Code that we have to follow. And so the grant guidelines that are going to be, reviewed and eventually adopted have to follow those legal requirements. Even though we do hear you loud and clear that there is a preference to fund artists directly, the law does not allow us to do so as currently as Measure P is written. So I just wanted to acknowledge that because I saw the comments and I appreciate your engagement, but we do need to follow the law on that one. And then there were comments about Fresno Arts Council and their role, and so I also just wanted to acknowledge that although the service agreement is no longer in place, that partnership in Cycle 3 looks like sharing information with their network. So I do appreciate Arts Council sharing these meetings on their social media. I know that they've sent things out to their newsletters and their mailing list. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that we do see that sharing of information, and we appreciate that partnership to make sure that if we're missing anyone, they have access to that information. So those were some of the comments that came through and I felt needed to be acknowledged. As far as funding priorities, there were a few public comments requesting the addition of certain priorities. And although those are important priorities, staff are recommending to PRAC that the language for priorities remain broad with a focus on Measure P and cultural arts, which would allow the most flexibility for applicants when preparing their applications. There were also comments related to defining diverse, and staff once again recommend keeping the language broad because applicants may wish to define what diverse looks like in the context of their proposal. And I think it would be potentially, obviously challenging to try to capture the diversity that we experience in, a few lines of text. So you'll see that the cultural arts plan as well, while it offers some definitions, acknowledges the challenge with trying to define that in a way that everyone agrees with. And then finally, several comments requested a definition of youth, and so we added a definition section to the back of the guidelines, and we'll get there, but just in practice, youth has typically been defined as 0 to 17, and then young adults typically 18 to 30. We offer this general definition, but also would like to keep it open and keep it broad so that we can expand access based on the applications that come in. So I'm going to pause there, and for page 5, are there any questions or comments from the commission?
No, I don't have any at this moment.
Not on page 5.
Okay, and then just as a matter of process, so I'll keep pausing. We've got a lot more pages now. But any comments received this evening, we're going to turn those around to bring to the full PRAC on the Monday meeting. So I want to create space for that, and then we'll get to the public comments later in the agenda as well. But just so you know the process.
Thank you.
Okay, page 6. The available funding and funding allocations, you'll see a lot of edits on this page. There were a lot of comments and a lot of different ideas, so I appreciate, again, everyone who went through and gave their opinion, whether that was online or through the listening sessions. So when we asked applicants or asked the community and PRAC whether applicants can apply for more than one type of funding or submit more than one application, the public comment reflect mixed opinions. But the general sentiment that I could glean from it was that the community wanted to ensure that more organizations had access to funding. And so one of the ways we're recommending that they have more access is by saying that an applicant, a nonprofit organization, could apply for general operating support or project support, but not both. So that's what the language reflects currently, and I'll open it for questions in a moment. But then several comments indicated that fiscal sponsors shouldn't, they should be able to apply for their own applications in addition to those that they're sponsoring. And so that language was added as well, so that if you're fiscally sponsoring, that doesn't preclude you from applying for operating or project support for your organization. And then this round of comments in the next section under award amounts was actually kind of surprising to me, but I wanted to make sure that we reflected what was stated by the community. We had originally proposed that awards would be made for 100%, the full amount that was requested, and then down the line as scoring went down, then the person at the end would maybe get a partial award, but there were many comments supporting that, but then there were some other comments that proposed 75% or 80% for consideration so that funding could be spread a little further. And then one thing I would say that most comments agreed on was that 30% to 60% was too low, so there was some clear agreement amongst the community there. Not a lot of agreement anywhere else, but that was loud and clear in those comments. So staff updated the guidelines to allow for partial awards, but really interested to get feedback on that. And it does make it easier to give 100% of awards when going through the scoring process and just funding everyone as it requested, but I can see the perspective from the community, wanting to make sure that everyone gets access. So we'll come back to that. And then public comments, again, another item that seemed to agree more so was splitting the amount of the pot that's available, the $6 million, 50% to project support and 50% to operating support. We received around one comment saying the minimum funding request should be $1,000, so we incorporated that. And then the maximum request table, I'm going to pause before I get into that because the next page kind of explains more rationale. So we'll pause there and then talk through any of the questions or comments that you have before we get to that maximum request table.
Go ahead.
Okay, on page 6, I think I had a question that you answered when you were narrating it, was that fiscally sponsored applicants can apply for either grant type, it sounds like. I think that may have been a difference from in prior years. Okay, so one of the things I noticed is, I wanted to suggest that where you say 50% of funding to one, 50% to the other, that you put in approximately 50%, and that is because in the past 2 cycles, there were fewer applicants for operating support than there were for project support, and there was a much higher number of applicants for project support. And the, I guess the general thought was that the money should go out into the community, not, and kind of like be exhausted, it should all go out. And that the goal would be 50-50, but if there weren't enough requests, I think, for one type than the other, that it should fund the other if there were enough requests there.
Okay.
I did have a question, I guess this 75 to 100%, when I watched the listening sessions, it sounded like there were several people who said, I'd rather get something than nothing. And I wasn't sure if then that percentage would be based on scoring and when the decision would be made, if it would be presented to the PRAC, like here's some alternatives, or, what that might look like to figure out what percentages are going to different potential awardees.
So we're going to talk about how that process would look when we go through the handbook later tonight. Because I will say that by not awarding 100% of what's requested, it adds another layer of complexity to try to decide, who gets 80, who gets 75, and what's the basis for deciding that. Staff's recommendation is still 100%, but I can't ignore, that several people asked for a range, but then others said, yes, we'd love to get 100%. So really, it's going to come down to your all's recommendations to help solidify what we put in here.
But if we fund, everyone at 100%, it may be the first 20 or 25 applicants, correct? And then because last cycle we had over about 100 applicants that applied, or no?
More than that.
More than that, but it was 100 and something that got awarded, correct? I don't have that number in the top of my head.
130 some odd, yeah.
So if we were to do 100%, that number would get decreased tremendously, and I don't think that that's fair to the art community.
And that is true. However, the caps that we'll get into as far as the maximum request are a little bit lower. And so by not being able to ask for, $300,000, the money may go further as well.
And I think it's all about how we create a scoring system that's fair and equity across the board, that'll allow many applicants to receive funding, even if it's not the 100% funding, but it still will create funding for those who are applying. So again, it will go back to the scoring system and the type of tier that will be created.
And ways I've seen it done before when I was writing grants in another industry was you ask the applicant, is this a scalable project? And if so, what would you, if you could receive a partial award, what aspects would need to be modified? So you can get input from the applicant, but then I've also gotten a lot of feedback from folks, even as we navigate cycle 2, that 30% is not enough. So that was loud and clear. And then you end up scaling down what you propose so much that is it still what you proposed? So there is no right answer. I will just acknowledge that. And again, there's not really any clear consensus from any of this. But that's what we're here tonight to say, what do we think would be best? And I thought maybe including what they said, but when we come to how to do that, it's challenging to define that process now because when you look at how applications are scored, in the past it was like, all right, if it's 3.5 or below, but that's like a game time decision because you look at what came in over that score. So without knowing how things score, how many are for projects versus operating, it's challenging to decide and know that that decision that we make now will be fair in the future based on the materials in front of us. Because it's easy for us to just pick some kind of methodology, but is it better to score and then make a best recommendation and deliberate that at PRAC to then see what percentages? So we are going to get into that in more detail. But is there any initial, what I'm hearing right now is you're open to the concept of maybe that 75% to 100% with clear parameters, or I don't want to put words in your mouth.
No, I'm afraid that if we go there, it's going to leave people out. And I don't want to leave applicants out if we just fund projects for 100%. Because we can have someone come in wanting to have $500,000, that's their ask. And how we're going to fund that. I'm just throwing out numbers just to use an example. And then we have the remainder that we have to divvy up against everybody else. I want to see a fair process, but as well as incorporating feedback from the community. Everything will not probably get in, but we're hearing it. We're trying to improve this process, and I just don't want to see anyone left out. So I'm looking at us maybe trying to create a scoring process, a tier process, and being very transparent with the public instead of waiting till we receive those applicants and this is how we're going to score your applicants. No, we need to be fair, and like if you fall in this, then this is how much you're going to get. If you fall over here, then this is how much you're going to get, because that's how it can be a fair process. And then we have to make sure that the panelists that we're hiring are able to score with an open mind and understand what culture means to each ethnicity group.
So I think that's really good feedback. Are you okay with the edit that says 75 to 100% and then how we tier that out, or do you want to see a lower percentage? Because there was pretty clear consensus that 30 to 60 was too low. 30
to 60 is too low. I'm good with the 75%.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good with the 75%. Okay. But I still would like to see a process on how that looked before I just say okay, and then I would like for it to go back out to the public if we're able to have that capacity to do.
Yeah, if I can speak a little bit to this. So cycle 2, I would say the percentages were disastrous. Again, I think it had the goal was to serve a wide section of the community, but it did come in at funding levels that really, I think decimated a lot of the proposed projects, which is why we saw awardees decline their award. Cycle 1, we also had percentages, different stratified percentages of awards. It's always went off of the scoring. If people came in, 90 to 100%, or 80 to 90%, or 70 to 80%, something like that. There was so much money in cycle 1 that we were able to award almost every single applicant a significant amount of their request. But I think maybe what would be helpful here is if, similar to the way I think, Kim is saying, like it's articulated so people know what to expect, perhaps, Chair McCoy, would be, it is anticipated that applications that score in the 90 to 100% range would receive 100% of the requested funding. And something where it kind of, much like you're looking at
like A, B, C, D, F.
Possibly, has a step down where if the scores come in at a lower percentage, it'll be known that it would be anticipated to be funded at a slightly lower percentage than a awardee that scored higher.
I think this is a really sensitive situation because if you award 100% to the top applicants and then divvy out the rest to the applicants who didn't score high, that's going to cause a conflict. So that's going to be another layer on multiple layers that we're trying to clear up right now that I don't want to deal with. And I don't think that any one of us wants to have that happen, because that's unfair and that's not right. So I think coming up with the process, and again, I'm going to go on record and say that I feel that this process is very rushed. I wish that there was some type of flexibility with the timeline that will allow us to really think things through and be able to come up with a process that will be satisfiable to the city, to the Parks Commission, as well as to the public. But this process is very rushed, so trying to make it fair and equitable is like we're going to keep going round and round. So again, I would like to see how that would look and how those tiers will be built out before I can even agree.
So a couple things. We did get a second legal opinion, and the June 30th deadline still stands. So I know that this is a fast process, and we are making every effort to publish things and make all the comments available, and have these meetings publicly to help with that. I think we should go through the maximum table and then come back to this, because when I did a quick calculation, just saying 6 million, I know there's change in there. And if we were to divide that by the maximum award, which there are very few nonprofits that could apply for the maximum award based on their size, but let's say all the nonprofits could, which again isn't the case, because based on the data, there's only about 13 that would be eligible. That's 40 awards. Now, if you divide 6 million, allow me to use a calculator because I don't do math in my head, by, let's say 75,000, that's 80 awards, so of 100% of their request. So in cycle 2, there was, I think, 132 or 134 awards. I'd have to have it in front of me, but so this would be fewer awards, but again, getting 30% wasn't acceptable to the community. So I think that the parameters that we're recommending for the maximum request would help to ensure that more people get awards. But again, as stated earlier, it is a competitive grant process, and so there will be people that apply that their application isn't awarded, but what we've built into the process is getting access to those scoring sheets and getting that feedback so that they could be successful in future rounds. So I'll go over the rationale behind those maximums, and then I think we'll come back, because staff can come up with a recommendation for the tiers, maybe using the A, B, C, D, E, F, G. But that recommendation would be put together and then brought before the PRAC on the 18th, because we are, I know, too quickly approaching the deadline, but we legally have been advised that we need to get that out.
I still have a problem with the 80 awards. I feel that the most impacted in the art community is going to be the artists. A lot of the artists that are out here providing services to our youth and teaching them how to do art and things like that. They're going to be the ones that are going to be hurting if we stick to what's recommended.
So if you're wanting...
If we were to fund everyone with your numbers, that what you just said, 80 awards at 100%, that's significantly low compared to the past 2 years. And I know the first year we did have a lot of more funding because it was still being built out and still being established. Mm-hmm. The second year was, okay, and now we're dealing with a little bit, almost 6.5 million. So being very transparent and being able to say, look, we have 6.5 for this cycle, and this is how much you're going to be getting, and being able to set an amount. So then when people are submitting their applications, if they're requesting the full amount of the set amount, I don't know how that would work. I'm just trying to throw out suggestions to where it'd be a process that's fair, and I don't know what that really looks like.
Fair, and I know how this is going to sound, but fair does not always mean that everyone gets everything they're asking for, because there are limited
But what I'm
funds.
saying is fair is making sure that each applicant is being considered and knowing that if they are awarded in certain tiers, this is how much they're going to be awarded.
And I think that's absolutely fair. So if we went off based like a grading system, which is society has adopted, right, the A through F, if there's percentages, but it is possible that if everyone writes really strong proposals and scores well, then people who got a B may not be funded. I've had that happen.
Or it's possible that we could reduce the amount, the asking amount, to make sure that we are funding everyone who scored very well. There has to be some type of wiggle room in order for us to be able to spread this money out into the arts community. There are a lot of struggling up and coming artists and nonprofits that depend on this money to keep going until they're able to really get fully established. So I want to make sure as an advocate that these people are being heard, that they're given a fair shot. We don't have control over every little aspect of this, but this is something that we can really have our input and our say in, and I want to make sure that we do that.
So what would be the best way, because I hear you want flexibility to look at how they've scored, clearly define what percentage you would get based on your score, but if that money is not going far enough, spread it around further. But how do I write it with that flexibility while maintaining trust? Because I'm trying to be as transparent as possible about how decisions will be made. But if we allow that flexibility, who's making that decision?
That's why we.
That's why we're here.
You guys are in charge of it, and we're providing input. I don't know who makes that decision.
I
just know that if I was on the other side, I'm putting myself in their shoes. I wear my community organizer hat all day, every day. So if I was out there listening to what was being presented to me, I wouldn't agree with this. So as me sitting in this chair, as chair, I don't agree with this.
Okay, so if I add in the range as we've discussed, and then add in language that would allow for the recommended funding awards to be made by who, I'm going to put a blank there, so that funding is widely distributed without compromising the proposals.
But that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that if we break it down in tiers and be like, this tier gets this funding amount, this tier gets this funding amount, I don't even know if that's a fair process, but at least we have some type of examples, something to look at to where we can maybe combine processes together or something, because I don't want what happened last time to happen again. And also on the flip side, applicants have to understand that they may ask for this dollar amount, but may only get this dollar amount. And getting that is because it's based off of the scoring. So again, we have to make sure that we have well-equipped panelists that are going to be scoring these applicants to do the best job that they can do, so we don't have a repeat of 1 and 2. So that I can best reflect what you'd like to see. If somebody scored, let's say percentiles, right? So if they scored between 90% to 100%, what percentage award would you recommend that they receive? And that's something that we will have to think about. I mean, I can't just come off the top of my head. I'm going to say, well, give them what they asked for because they scored 90%. But is that fair?
Well, let's
no,
just start
it's
there.
not.
Let's just start there.
Yeah, so it's like, coming up with the table. That's why it should have been different scenarios that we are able to look at to be able to provide, because what I'm looking at now, and then I hear the comments that are being made, 30 to 60% is really low. So being able to fund them at least 75% when there are grantees, and then being able to fund the 25% at a later date. I do agree with that part.
Okay.
Because they're going to need more than 60% to get up and running. So I do agree with the 75%. It's just that how are we going to decide who gets what is the question that I'm grappling with.
Shelby, I was wondering if you could explain how you see the tiers working, because I didn't really follow how the tiers work. And one of the things that I had a huge question on was how a fiscally sponsored applicant fits within this, because it's based on annual total revenue. The definitions relate back to the IRS filings, the Form 990s. But any fiscally sponsored applicant would not have any of that. Some of the applicants are individuals or collectives that have no tax history for the work that they're doing. And so I didn't even understand how they would fit in on this chart.
Okay, so just going back to your comment on the tiers, staff will recommend something for you to react to. And we will do our best to make it as fair as possible. But again, I will restate that there will be situations where there's a situation that we didn't contemplate. And what I've noticed is that there's a level of discomfort when we leave things too vague, but there's a level of discomfort when we're too explicit. And so we are doing our best to navigate those conflicting realities. Okay. So then let's go into the maximum request. The comments that we received from the public indicated that there are some challenges competing with organizations that are making annual revenue greater than $1 million. So last round, there's emerging and established, and the difference was $50,000 was the line between the two. But the comments indicated that those larger organizations had a little more capacity to compete. And then there were some comments, I think even from folks in the room here in writing, that there should be more like a tiered system. So based on organization size, how much could they be eligible for? So I'm going to turn to page 7 because I explain a little bit more of how we got there. And what we tried to look at, because once again, there was no clear consensus. That would be wonderful, but there was not in the comments. And so I'm going to walk through that, and then I think what you bring up is important because we did wrestle with how do we define this, especially for those who are being fiscally sponsored, but then what does it mean to be fiscally sponsored? Are you... in some cases, the folks we've been interacting with through our work with Cycle 2 actually do have nonprofit organizations too, and so one size fits all is kind of challenging. So hopefully you can have some insights as to how we would better define this or what other tools we might use. But in the general operating support section, I just added the comment there that there were a lot of comments about general operating support specifically and the cap of what that should look like. The comments range from $100,000 to $500,000. Suggestions also included limiting the award to 5% of total available funding or no more than 30% of an organization's annual budget. Since there were no clear consensus, staff also reviewed other guidelines to kind of gauge a standard of practice between other grant-making entities that award for general operating. And then ultimately we in forming our recommendation, we included that for project as well. But let me go back to my comment here, and if you're following along, this is on page 7. The California Arts Council includes a cap of $30,000 for general operating support. Funding for that program, I think it was currently or recently open, is limited to organizations that have a total revenue of less than 1.5 million or 5 million, depending on the type of organization. San Diego also has a similar program, and they award operating support based on the total annual operating income. So organizations receive a percentage share of their total operating income, with that range being $10,000 up to $400,000 for the organizations that were around 10 million in operating income. Staff also reviewed publicly available 990s using ProPublica, which indicated that there were 202 nonprofits in Fresno that are designated as arts, cultural, or humanities. Of that 202, 6% or 12 organizations, and again, I cited my source. I don't know if this is the best one, but it was available. Reported annual revenue greater than 1 million, with the vast majority, though, of the organizations reporting less than 100,000 in revenue. So based on, I don't know, your all's experience, that kind of tracked with the number of emerging applicants that we saw in prior rounds. So many organizations have a smaller annual revenue if they're designated, at least in the arts and cultural or humanities designation based on that report. So seeing as how there was once again no clear consensus and there were public comments asking for kind of a tiered cap so that there was a little bit more money available to those emerging groups and it wasn't just, $50,000 as the cutoff. We recommended a tier based on the annual revenue, but your question about the emerging, I think we need to discuss what that looks like. But the tier was really kind of landing somewhere in the middle of what the community had asked for. I mean, obviously, operating funds are essential, but what was provided in past rounds was on the higher end of some of the other standards of practice, which, I mean, that there's nothing wrong with that, but in the interest of spreading the money around, as the chair was talking about, lowering the maximum that could be requested would mean that there's more money for others as well. As far as emerging artists and being sponsored, if they had a nonprofit organization that maybe isn't quite ready to take on all the functions but is emerging, then we would use the revenue that they report, and whether that's less than 50 by using the postcard or the tax. I'm not a tax expert, but I did a little research to try to figure out what would be the best way. But as far as an artist who is not a nonprofit, what recommendations would you all have for how we would distinguish how to determine total revenue, or if there is another way to do this?
So my thought is that if there is an applicant, such as one coming in as under fiscal sponsorship that isn't a 501c3, or maybe is very newly formed and doesn't have a 2025 tax history, that they would be eligible for the up to 50,000. They would be in that tier until they are able to have the relevant tax, documentation to show that they would be qualified for something higher.
Do you think and this is something I wrestled with too, is 2025 the appropriate year, or would accepting 2024 allow more flexibility? I'm not sure how often people are staying on top of their taxes if they get extensions. What would be your all's opinion?
I think you'd want to have some flexibility there. I think that, I think that when Cycle 1 and Cycle 2 happened, there were a number of organizations that started putting pressure on their CPAs and things to get the taxes filed so they could have the information. Cycle 2, because a lot of the funding has been kind of a mess, I don't even know to what extent organizations, how they're reflecting things for 2025, how many would take extensions and stuff. It might be better if you allowed organizations maybe to show you more than 1 year or something if they have somewhat of a varying history, or if they are under a valid extension for their 25 filing, that they can just, maybe make an affirmative statement that their 2025 tax, hasn't been filed yet, but here's the most recently filed one, and something like that could be acceptable.
Chair McCoy, do you have any comments on the tiering? I know in the interest of trying to make sure that funding gets out as broadly as possible, are there any changes that you recommend to the maximum funding? Because one way to achieve that is through scoring and percentage allocations, but another tool that can be used is through the maximum funding request. Okay. None of this is easy, by the way. This is how my brain works as I tried to...
Yeah. So this is for a general operating support. So what if we have someone like Kimberly, Chair McCoy's orchestra, who's very established in the community, and I have like 20 employees. How is my funding gonna be affected by this?
So you're seeking operating support?
Yes.
So the first thing that we would look at is what your total revenue in fiscal year 25 or 24, most recent if you haven't filed, was. So for Chair McCoy's orchestra, what would be your revenue?
Say 1.5 million.
Okay, so based on this as written, and I'm going to get into the rest of this page though, because this is hard. Okay, so based on this as written, you would be able to request 150,000. But there's a critical piece of information here about your organization. So I'm going to explain that, and then we can decide how much you'd be available for. Okay, so Measure P, Section 7, 1506, and I'm on page 7 for those who are following along, indicates that the general operating support grants, this doesn't apply to project support, must reflect the proportion of each grantee's overall operations that serves residents within or visitors to the City of Fresno's sphere of influence. And we got a lot of questions about sphere of influence. There's a map that defines that, and that's listed and linked in the definition section. But I need to ask you, Chair McCoy, does your orchestra, and again, this is all hypothetical, so don't, not a conflict of interest, but just, do you travel to other cities to perform?
Yes.
Okay, well, that's going to make us have to calculate this. Okay, so if you didn't, and your overall operation only serves residents in Fresno or visitors, so you could be bringing people in from Yosemite, wherever, then you could have asked for the 150,000.
Okay.
But because your organization, a hypothetical organization, has a percentage of the overall operation that includes operations outside of our sphere of influence. So you're taking your operation, maybe you're going to perform in Kalinga. I don't know, anywhere really, that's just hypothetical. What percentage of your overall operating budget or your overall revenue, so you said you're at 1.5, how much of that are you spending on operating outside of this area?
Let's just say 5%.
Okay.
Because I'm trying to understand it, so.
Okay, so if we say that you have 1.5, let me clear it out, and 5% is spent in Kalinga, so $75,000. Okay, so then we're going to do a calculation. We're going to subtract that amount from the amount, so 1.5, we're going to subtract that amount, and I'm on number 3 on this page. Your annual total operating budget, so 1.5 minus operating budget allocated to operations outside of Fresno, minus 75,000, is going to be your maximum general operating request. So the example included, if an organization has a total operating budget of $100,000 and $45,000 of that budget is used for implementing programs outside of Fresno, so that's your traveling performance, the maximum general operating support request would be calculated as follows. So 100,000 minus 45 equals 55,000. So let me redo this example because I think number 3 might be kind of confusing. So even though the table below indicates that the organization, in your case, would be eligible for up to $150,000, a percentage of your operating budget is used outside of the city. So your example is not really helping here because because you could technically get the maximum,
and that's my point.
You could technically get the maximum for yours, but in the other example that I've provided for smaller organizations based on a more realistic cross section of organizations.
Is this the same tier that we used last round? I wasn't on the
No, it was not. And this is something that has been included because for operating support, let's say 50% of your organization's operation is traveling outside of the area, then the City of Fresno Measure P would not be funding that work.
My question is it able to, I'm looking at someone who is a small nonprofit, and they're not able to only give $50,000 for operating support. I mean, $50,000 for operating support, and they may need more than that. But because they fall in this tier, that's not really like, it's just not really registering to me right now. Maybe I need more coffee, or I don't know what the case may be, but it just seems like if you're a big org, you are able to qualify. It doesn't seem like it's a even playing field, because I know if I'm up and coming and I have 4 staff and I have them on at maybe $35,000 a year, that's still pretty low to live in Fresno, but I am just throwing out numbers. I'm going to need more for operating support to keep them on.
Yes. So that's 2 different issues. One is making sure that the percentage
and then
is...
making sure that I have a place and supplies, and I'm able to meet my deliverables, and I'm able to showcase my art. Like, it seems like this portion needs more funding, in my opinion.
So would you recommend then, based on that feedback, that the amount that the smaller organizations can seek be higher?
I want to say yes so bad, but then I don't want to. It's like I wish we could just have a set, like, okay, you get this and you get that. I wish I could be Oprah right now and just give away money.
It doesn't have Measure P competitive process.
I know.
It's unfortunate.
It's like we have to sit here and make these decisions because we have this, and I can't stress it enough, this timeline coming up. And even though I have went through this because we received it, this still is not showing to me a good enough process, and then we have to make this decision in such a short time to meet a timeline that should be extended anyway. So I'm just having a hard problem. I'm just going to hold my questions until we go through, so I can figure out how
we can go through it and we'll come back
to do some things.
And I think even if we took a year, I mean, this is a very, very fast process, I will acknowledge that, but even if we took a year, we would never reach consensus. We would never reach consensus, because there's just, at the end of the day, there's, $6.5 million available, not $500 million.
But even if we took a year, at least we'll be completed with all the mishaps in round 2, right? Because some things, and I know this is the subcommittee, but I'm just going to bring it out. We still have people who have not received grant funding or received all of their funding that they qualify for. They're still having a hard time trying to upload documents and get reportings done in the website that was created, from the software that was created. So until we address and get everything resolved with cycle 2, I'm having a hard time starting cycle 3. Because I'm still getting calls of, I haven't received the rest of my grant funding. The website is unfriendly, this, and that. So, like, it's like I have no words because I'm a little frustrated with this. But I'm going to just reserve
We're working through it. That's fine.
My questions and let you continue on with your presentation. And thank you for the presentation and walking through everything page by page.
Yeah, and I know it takes time, so I appreciate everyone who's hanging in here with us, but I think it's important to talk through because, again, there's no perfect solution. It's difficult to wrestle with. And I can see that maybe I need to revisit my example, because in your situation, you can still get the maximum, but the example I included in here was intended for some of those smaller organizations because I think they're the ones who are going to be probably doing the math. But are there any other comments related to?
But it shows, my example shows that regardless if there's a percentage and I'm still this big org, I'm still going to qualify for the maximum.
You're right.
But your example doesn't really show how it's really going to hurt the smaller org. So no matter if I do 2% or 20%, most likely I'm still going to be able to qualify for the $150,000 versus a smaller organization. So that's why my example, I did what I did to show that it doesn't matter. I'm still going to be able to get this, but the smaller organizations are going to be the ones that's hurting.
I think that's a really important point. Do you want to increase the maximum that they can apply for?
I would like to.
What would you like to increase it to?
I would at least like to increase it by 25,000 if possible.
Okay, so if you're less than 50,000, they could get up to 75?
I would like to see that.
And then do you want that 25 rolling all the way up, or do you working, so from the top it's 150, then 125, then 100,000.
It should just be 50,000 to 200,000, 75,000. I don't like the 50,000 and $1. Because what if someone is 50,000 and 99 cents? That disqualifies them.
Oh, I know. It's like, well, Price is Right. I know.
So I don't like the $1 hanging over.
Okay, so 0 to 100,000 or 0 to 200,000 would be the 75. So eliminate the 50,000 for the operating support.
I think so.
Okay, and then on page 6, do you want to carry that over into the projects, or would you like to just see that operating gets a little bit more to get established, but projects remain?
Let's make it fair.
And what does that mean? Same or?
Same as the,
okay.
Yes.
Okay, so the minimum award then is going to be the maximum for those smaller orgs will be 75, which is an increase compared to the prior year. And then emerging in the past couldn't apply for operating, so by allowing them to apply, we're further supporting their ability to emerge. Okay?
Shelby, I had some additional questions on
Sure.
page 7. Was this percentage of outside activity, is that self-identified information? Is that something they are disclosing when they're doing the application? I mean, of the 12, I call them, there was, a few years ago it was Big 10, because there were 10 organizations that were within the city limits that made so much money, or over 800,000, I think. There are a couple that do work throughout the state and or are national. Are they going to be submitting with their operating application and their revenue statements like a self-identification of how much they work they do outside? And then is it expected of everybody? What would that look like?
So this would only apply for the operating support. And what I'm envisioning and why the application questions are not all listed yet, because we're still working through the details of the questions that we would need to ask. But one of the questions would be, do you do any work outside of the sphere of influence? And then if yes, what percentage? And it would be a self-identification, but if there's something on the financial statements, I know I saw in the 990 that grants and things are disclosed, but you wouldn't necessarily know the scope of work within those. So it would be relying on them to self-report. But if there's a better way, open to feedback, I think that was the best way. And I would imagine, a lot of the organizations post what they do on their website and things, and so it wouldn't be terribly difficult to try to verify if there were any concerns about a misreporting. We could work through that, but I would have to have some level of trust there.
Okay, thanks. And then I know on the prior page with the projects, we were talking about looking at different options, maybe potential percentages for the general operating support grants. Were you talking about the same thing? Or in your example where somebody has a lower maximum funding amount that they're eligible to apply for, would your person or your organization that would come in at, I think it was 55,000 as their maximum funding request, their application would just come in the tier at 55,000 and
so they could get no more than 55.
Okay.
But if the rules
up to 100% depending on what's decided as far as
right. So you might have asked for this amount, but because you're proportionately, that would be over the proportion in Measure P, then you could get a maximum of that 55, but potentially less if we go with a ABCD percentage. But I can try to make this a little more user-friendly. I know that it's conceptually additional math, but our thought would be that in the application we could ask questions, so you're not really doing the math, it's walking you through it.
Okay, and then in this approach, it's still everybody who applies for project grants is competing against everybody who applies for project grants, and then everybody who applies for operating grants is basically competing against each other, and then it determines based on like their annual revenue, how much they might get awarded if they score very well in the pool of everybody? Is that the thought?
Yes, I know based on the comments, they wanted like tiers, and I know that in prior cycles there was, approximately 10% set aside for this, approximately 10% for that, and functionally the comments that we received were that like emerging artists they asked for a larger share, but proportionately didn't get as much as maybe established, and so when trying to determine that, I think the percentages would end up being arbitrary, and set-asides can work, but then on the flip side, limiting the maximum request also is a tool to make sure that money goes further. So if there's a preference to try to set aside a minimum of $1 million for XYZ, we can certainly put that in the guidelines, but again, if you score really well, but you didn't make the set-aside, I don't know if that's fair either. Thoughts? The hope was that by creating maximums, there would be more money to go around. So you would be able to compete, and by providing the rubric, which is more detailed, applicants could include that information, but open to any other recommendations. We can come back to it too if you.
Yeah, I guess it'll be interesting to hear what the full commission thinks at the upcoming meeting. I know that in prior years there's a lot of kind of concern and consideration given to making sure that all parts of the city were served, and that there was some like intentionality, I would say, around not less than amounts of funding for underrepresented, underserved, and so I just don't know how that would be reflected at all in the current proposed funding arrangement.
Yeah, and I think that is challenging because what we hear is, our organization might be located here, but really we're doing most of our work there. So then what district are you in? So if we were to slice the money up geographically to make sure that it's widely distributed, that might result in really good proposals in the southern areas, like once that's fully exhausted, not having enough funds to then compete against. So we did leave it really broad, and I know that doesn't resolve wide distribution, but by creating arbitrary divisions, that also makes it challenging to compete. So, but think about it, and if there's something that we can add or do a set aside, we could certainly recommend that.
I think as commissioners, it's our job to make sure that we notify our network of residents that we work with, that we know that are in the art community, that this process is open. Because you're going to get applicants from all over, and they have to go through the protocol. They have to go through the scoring process. All we can do is be the trusted messenger and be like, hey, this is open, apply. There's no guarantee that you're going to be awarded, but it doesn't hurt to try, right? I think that's what this measure was written for, and that's why we have this portion, because the arts has been overlooked in our community when it comes to our up-and-coming artists and other nonprofits that are doing the work. So it's our job and our duty to let our people know that this is open now, and make sure you have all your ducks in a row and apply.
Yeah, and I think that's fair, and I hear a lot of the public comments saying, well, we don't know how to do it, this is too much, and I hear you, and I know that processes can be challenging, but our goal really is to come alongside as best as possible, because I do believe that the community is capable, and I think that if we can shift from, well, I don't know how to do this, to, okay, what is it, or I don't understand what you shared with me, can you please restate that or show another way? I don't want the community to sell themselves short, because I've seen what Fresno can be capable of, regardless of people's, training and background education. So I would like to help change that narrative. But in any case, that's an aside. So let's.
I think if we conduct our community meetings and walk them through the process and have laptops or tablets available to make sure that they are filling out everything correctly and walking through the process, that will eliminate a lot of, I don't know how to do this, I don't know how to do that. Because now everything is being done on the computer, and some people are not as computer savvy as the next person. So you're going to have to walk them through it, and you're going to have to show them how to do it. And it may take a couple of times. It may take next cycle. You're going to have to do it again, but that's what we're here for. So even if we have to, as commissioners, help our network of residents that we're working with and walk them through the process, that's why we sit here representing them. So if that's what we have to do, that's what we have to do, to make sure that no one gets left behind and no one is not being able to submit because they don't know how to use the system.
Yeah, agreed. And if they're willing to not give up on themselves, we're not planning to give up on them. So I hope that we can change that narrative. And I know we responded to some feedback about needing a graphic. There's copies in the back. Sarah was handing it out. We got that feedback. Turned it around.
Go a long
Visuals,
way.
yeah. And so we do hear you, and hopefully that can help. But I don't want to get too far off course because I could speak to the belief I have in Fresno forever. But
You and I
are
both.
there? We just got to believe in ourselves is, I think, the key there. But on page 7 and page 6, this is where a lot of the comments came in. I think we've talked through some edits, so I feel like we can make some edits before presenting to PRAC. Is there any other questions or comments before I move on to page 8? No? Okay. All right. So we did get a lot of comments about additional milestones being added so that there is greater transparency for every step in the process. And I also want to acknowledge that there have been many requests for a standard schedule for each cycle of funding so that we can all fall into a routine, like every January it's this, every December. We share that request. I think, as you know, we are trying to respond to cycle 2 and stand up cycle 3 under really tight timelines, but I just want to say very clearly that we would really like to have that schedule situated so that we all can get into a workable routine with plenty of time. This timeline doesn't speak to future cycles, but just again, I hear you, I share that, we agree. But all right, so in this timeline, I went back through to update some of the forecasted months. There were a lot of questions about the June 30th and expressing that everyone wanted more time. And I don't disagree with that, but that's the legal opinion we've received on 2 separate occasions. So this is our way to make the funds available. So we're moving through with that. Many comments related to matching fiscal sponsors to artists seeking sponsorship. So staff are proposing to schedule opportunities for that kind of like meet and greet as part of the technical assistance workshops, providing enough time to go over how to apply while also providing a location and space for organizations that are interested in fiscally sponsoring and those who are looking for a fiscal sponsor. I know fiscal sponsorship helps to realize, folks' projects and things, but also just networking too, because there's also contract work that could be done by artists in grants. I mean, maybe they're hired for murals and things like that, so that would get money to artists. But meet and greet space we thought could be helpful to respond there. We also, PRAC expressed interest in participating in the selection of the scoring committee members. So we asked for a legal opinion on that. So I should have that information back shortly about PRAC being able to participate in that selection. We updated the deadline for the grant applications. There was some comments about having at least 3 months or 90 days to apply. So by changing the deadline to September 30th, there on page 8, it's highlighted. That would give a little bit more time from the June 30th announcement to the September 30th deadline. And then there were some folks who, wanted to get funding as soon as possible, which again, I completely understand, but just trying to balance allowing enough time for everyone to apply. We did update that. We also broke out the steps that would be required to review and indicated the scheduled PRAC meeting dates for the appeals, because we already have like October 12th on the calendar. And so by putting appeals on the agenda, Chair, that would be an opportunity for people to appeal if they weren't selected to be a scoring member. So you'll see appeal dates, which are just based on our PRAC's adopted calendar. Going into page 9, you'll see that we get more into estimations, and that's partially due to the fact that PRAC's calendar for the year and the council's calendar for the year typically get adopted in January, and so we won't have the exact dates, but tried to estimate as best as possible when those steps would happen. So I hope that provides additional clarity for those that asked for additional clarity. Are there any questions on the timeline before I get into the eligibility? No? Okay.
No, you can't extend it, so.
I would love to. I mean, I hear you. I don't disagree, but it's based on legal opinion. So eligibility for eligible applicants. There were a lot of questions about what does good standing mean, and so we added bullets to clarify what good standing meant, and then if you're looking at the document electronically, you can click a link for each of those entities, and that will give you the tool that you need to see if you're considered in good standing. And as I stated earlier, it's never too soon to check, so I would recommend that you start checking now. There were comments that asked for us to wait to determine good standing until contract. And while I understand that does give a lot more wiggle room for folks if they're not currently in good standing, that is functionally very challenging, because if your project was recommended for award and it was approved and it makes all the way through, but then you're not in good standing, then that is money that wouldn't be available. It would be, we wouldn't be able to award it, and then we'd have to figure out how to go back to the next eligible scored candidate. So by saying that you need to be in good standing at the time of application, then that screening process is resolved, and funds that are awarded can actually get to the applicant. So I saw those comments, but I did not incorporate that into the timeline, because as you can see, there's so many steps in the process that we felt it would be most transparent to set that line now. But again, I cannot say it enough. Check your standing now, because it takes time to correct it if something is incorrect. Moving on to page 10, we updated the city of Fresno. I know there were concerns about what does it mean to be in good standing, so I just indicated debarment status, and there's more information about debarment later in the guidelines. So that was what was intended by good standing in that situation. And then there was a lot of comments about cycle 2 shouldn't negatively impact cycle 3. And so you'll notice that the reporting that would have previously made someone ineligible, we moved that language up into page 10, where we say that organizations that have not completed reporting for cycle 1, so not cycle 2, I understand that the reporting isn't completed because we're still trying to resolve that, but they would need to work to develop a corrective action plan or a written justification so that we could see if there's a reasonable reason why they weren't able to complete it, and that shouldn't preclude them. So that does give us some flexibility there. And a template for what that looks like will be provided so that those folks who maybe didn't complete what they needed to in cycle 1 could resolve it in time for cycle 3. So that was incorporated. We also added some language to increase the flexibility of what an arts or cultural organization is defined as. Previously, the NTEE codes were included, or another state or federal designation. We did add language for organizational articles of incorporation. So if arts and culture is mentioned within that, that helps to expand maybe who might be eligible. And then we got some questions about the eligibility screening form and what that was going to look like, if it was going to be a lot of, I guess, work to do that in lieu of a letter. And so really we're looking for a checklist format so you can say, you know, I'm this or that, and then it pops down with other questions. So it should be a very simple screening to get you the link you would need to apply. So before I go into eligible expenses, are there any questions about eligible applicants? No? Okay. So eligible expenses, there were some comments related to direct costs and how marketing could be considered a direct cost, which is a good point. So we added marketing there. The core operating expenses for project support grants are capped at 10%, but I did add clarifying language because we understand that the cost of insurance that's required by the city, in some cases having that 10% cap, having that insurance as part of it, then it makes it more challenging to get that insurance if it's considered like an indirect. So for the purposes of that 10% threshold, insurance would not count toward that cap. So insurance could be considered a direct cost as part of the project. And then the 10% for operating as part of that project could go toward other things like a portion of the utilities or so forth. So we hear you, we know insurance is expensive, and so we incorporated that. And then for construction, there was mixed language of support or not support. I mean, there wasn't a clear consensus in the comments, but we tried to add some language to clarify. So construction/facility improvements. Based on the caps that you see in the draft guidelines, it isn't that we're proposing someone build a $30 million facility. It's more so the Cultural Arts Plan calls out some facility improvements that would be needed to expand access, like a ramp to get into doorways, or in some cases like an elevator repair so that you can access the second story of a museum. And so we added some language that hopefully addresses some of those concerns. But I will say that when you do construction, there are other regulations and things that we'll have to try to navigate together based on city rules. So the Culture Arts Plan gives more examples. I would just direct you there. Talks about lighting and just various improvements that I know some of these older facilities could really benefit from, and that can expand access so people can attend at different hours and so forth. So we also included, I'm on page 11 now, the costs associated with providing technical assistance. That was in there, but examples were requested. So we added some of the examples with flexible enough language that would be like a but not limited to. So there is some expenses to provide that technical assistance work, and say, you know, you're funded to then help emerging artists establish nonprofits. There's expenses associated with doing that work, so that would be an eligible expense. And there was a lot of questions about when you would need quotes for equipment that's $5,000 or more. And I put in there not at the time of application, because I realize there's a lot of labor to gather those expenses. Although when preparing your application, please try to cost things realistically, because things do tend to increase in cost over time. But we wouldn't ask for the 3 quotes until after, as part of your purchasing. There was examples that needed to be included about what we mean by equipment or things exceeding $5,000. I think, Chair McCoy, that might have been one of your early questions from one of the first meetings, so we added that. Fiscal sponsor fees are an eligible expense based on actual costs incurred, so we gave some examples of those fiscal sponsor fees and capped that fee at 10% as well, because that would be in line with the past caps for other types of funds. We added as eligible projects in schools during school hours based on the public comments received, and then projects on university campuses that are open to the general public as well, because we did receive several comments requesting that be eligible. And then before I go into ineligible applicants, are there any questions or further clarification needed?
Yeah, my question on page 11 was around, I guess, the organizations as fiscal sponsors, if that was just the arts and cultural organizations, which are eligible as direct applicants. I saw the note around seeking legal clarification on eligibility of other nonprofit types, but it wasn't clear to me where that fell, if that was on this page or a different page.
It's all starting to blend together, huh? So I think the nonprofit, that is going to be in section 3 about the different types of nonprofits seeking legal clarification. But then on comment 26 on page 11, we did get some questions about could we cover legal fees, accounting, and filing fees to establish nonprofits? So that we've sent that to City Attorney's Office for clarification there.
Comment 28.
Yes, so I'm going to get into that right now. For ineligible applicants, the nonprofit organizations that are religious, political, or private foundations. So there were a lot of comments in person and online about how to define political organizations, clarity regarding religious organizations, preferences to include them, preferences to not include them. And so we submitted a request for legal advisement about the definition of nonprofit organizations. I think for operating support, the ordinance in expenditure category 4 clearly states arts and cultural organizations, but for project support, Measure P does have a definition of what a nonprofit is within the ordinance, and so we just want to make sure that we get legal advisement, and then once we do, we would be able to then clarify that, whether they're ineligible or eligible or only eligible for certain types of funding. And so that has been submitted. Any other pages? Well, let me get into the other ineligible applicants, and then we'll see if there's any other questions that you have on page 11. There weren't a lot of edits made there, just that comment that I flagged because we have submitted for a legal opinion, and then no further edits on that page 11. Any other questions from the commission? No? Okay. Okay, page 12. There was a question about what does it mean to reasonably expand access. I gave a broad example. So for example, purchases that are unrelated to the proposed scope of work and do not demonstrate a clear tie to achieving the goals of the project. So I know this is kind of far-fetched, but if you had in your application that you were going to do a community event and then you submit a receipt because you bought a brand new car, that's not going to be an eligible expense under that framework. So it is broad language, but that does allow us flexibility if expenses don't seem to tie to the scope of the work, the budget that was approved, and so forth. You'll see we struck out the school hours for number 9 and number 10. We also said that no cost shall be incurred prior to execution of the grant agreement. And I think this is a challenge that we're running into. If work is performed before an agreement is in place, there's insurance and liability issues with that because you can't go back in time to have insurance cover things. So we just, with most of the grant making that the city does, unless there's some prior written thing in place or prior insurance obtained, performing work before you have a grant agreement is not how we'd like to proceed. It just introduces so many challenges that we're still navigating. Fiscal sponsorship, there was a lot of questions about clarification of the role of a fiscal sponsor. And so we added language in here to give examples of responsibilities that include everything from entering into the agreement to receiving all grant disbursements, maintaining the insurance as required, and assuming fiduciary responsibility, including accountability and oversight of all the expenditures. Fiscal sponsorship is not something to take lightly, and it comes with a lot of responsibility because contractually you are obligated to the terms of the agreement. So we did add in some language to give those responsibilities, but certainly there are others that may not be contemplated here. These are just examples. On page 13, we say that the financial expenditures should be documented with expenditure reports, and receipts and invoices and things should be kept as backup documentation, which is what was included in prior grant agreements, but I think it was important to call that out here in the guidelines. And then providing training and technical assistance to ensure that progress and final reports are completed by the required deadlines. We did get a lot of comments about placing a cap on the fiscal sponsorship. And there were comments opposed to it, while others recommended it. There were several current fiscal sponsors indicating that there's a lot of responsibility that comes with sponsoring. Public comments ranged from anywhere of no cap to a maximum of 3 to 10. But I do, again, want to stress that by being the fiscal sponsor, you are legally responsible. So we did get a question because I realized that by putting a cap, there's a need for fiscal sponsorship. And so we did get a question about the nonprofits and if there are other types of nonprofits that might be eligible to fiscally sponsor. So that's included in my legal request to see if maybe that fiscal sponsorship pool could be open more broadly. But what staff are proposing is that no more than a maximum of 5 grantees to be fiscally sponsored, representing no more than a combined total of $150,000 in grant funding that's under fiscal sponsorship. That would not count against the fiscal sponsor and what they're applying for. So if they applied for $150 for their own org and then $150 through a combination of fiscally sponsored projects, they could potentially have under their management $300,000. Would you like to comment, Laura? I see you have a...
I have a lot to say about this.
Okay.
Okay, so as you know, I watch all the listening sessions. I watched all of the subcommittee meetings. I've read all the comments. I was shocked that this came in at a recommendation of 5 as a cap and then a low, corresponding amount of money that the fiscal sponsors, I guess, can oversee. In part, there were over 150 public comments just on fiscal sponsorship. About 5 of those talk about a cap. 2 of those talk about maybe capping for a first-time fiscal sponsor, but then not for a subsequent or experienced fiscal sponsor. And the one from comment 414, if you watch that listening session number 2, and it's at minute 34, you can hear the person talking about it, and they're clearly confused, do not understand what a fiscal sponsor is and what it means. They were saying, this is the one who said that they thought their treasurer was their fiscal sponsor. When I saw that, I thought, this is the person who does their compliance or financial compliance, That's not a fiscal sponsor. So I would say overwhelming majority of feedback that appears to have been received didn't really seem to correspond to the recommendation of 5. So what I did also was, I assume this cap has to be at the front end because you don't know how many of your fiscally sponsored proposed applicants are going to score well and be selected and go forward as awardees. So I looked at, for cycles 1 and 2, how many fiscal sponsors there were and how many, we saw change over cycle 1 to cycle 2. And, I think there's been a lot of attention on Dolce up front because they made themselves available to sponsor a really high number of applicants because of the great community need when there already is a shortage of fiscal sponsors. And they did tremendous work, and being a fiscal sponsor really is a service, 10% of the award, especially these smaller end awards, does not compensate the amount of time and attention, that's needed for these fiscal sponsors that are doing more than just being a pass-through or reporting. But, I saw that, in cycle 1, we had CMAC apply to sponsor 6, and then they went up to try to sponsor 13. The Historic Society started with, I think, 1 in cycle 1, moved up to 6 for cycle 2. There were a number that didn't sponsor any in cycle 1 that offered to sponsor, 1 to 5 or 6 in cycle 2. And I thought that there really was no corresponding relationship between administrative capacity and this cap of 5. I think, some of these organizations are very well established and, feel that they can do well sponsoring a higher number of applicants, not knowing how many of those they'll end up actually sponsoring. And one of the things that I appreciated during some of the listening sessions was the conversations that were had around letting sponsored projects be able to provide feedback about how well the sponsorship was going or what their expectations were and how they were being served, and I thought that would help kind of, if that feedback was being collected, that could help inform maybe for certain organizations whether or not they should have a smaller number if they were not meeting the needs of their sponsoree. But I just really think that 5 was surprisingly low.
What do you recommend?
I would say for the organizations that feel they have administrative capacity, maybe 15, or up to 20.
And what does it mean to feel you have the capacity?
So
is that experience? Is that size? What is that?
I mean, a lot of the organizations are very different, but a lot of them that are being fiscal sponsors, they have the outside accounting help or expertise, I think, to manage all the financial oversight that's required, especially when you have different projects that are on being implemented on different timelines, and things like that. So if they have that, financial administrative capacity to manage this number of projects, and then some of the fiscal sponsors, I think, see their role as helping to, support and grow the projects, and others are offering, I think, less of that service, and if maybe if there was, I think, just more, I think the organizations that are trying to offer a lot to their sponsorees maybe would self-select that they're not going to take on as many, that they wouldn't exceed 10, but for the ones that think they are able to, and you're getting feedback that it's going well, I think that it's doing a disservice to the community to artificially limit them.
And how do you, what is the...
Can I
yes.
chime in before you ask Vice Chair Ward the number? I'm against the cap because if it wasn't for organizations like Dulce up front, a lot of our artists and other people would not have been able to be in the competitive process of the grant process. And it's not up to us for us to decide if they have the capacity. They know their organization. They may even have set staff aside to be prepared to handle those sponsorships. If we put a cap on it, that's going to hurt the art community, in my opinion. And I like what Dulce up front is doing because not only are there fiscal sponsors, but they're also helping the people receive their nonprofit status. So they don't have to have a fiscal sponsor anymore. So by you capping that, it's gonna hurt the community because yes, they may have sponsored, and I'm not really trying to put Dulce up front out in the center and put them on blast. But I'm just saying, the work that they're doing is not only that are they a fiscal sponsor, but they're helping people fill out their paperwork to become a nonprofit so they won't have to use a fiscal sponsor in 2 years or so. So putting a cap on that, I don't think that's a good idea because our fiscal sponsors know what they're able to handle and what they're not able to handle.
So I have a question. So I know that the fiscal sponsorship model is used. I've seen it in different arts grants and things. But one of the things I was wondering is if what we're hearing is that artists would like to be funded to do the work, and we have Measure P, which says we have to fund nonprofits, right? Is another way to get money to artists and you'll see in the scoring rubric further along in this, to prioritize awards to nonprofits that hire local artists, which is what I recommend in the scoring. I realize the fiscal sponsorship has been something that there are a lot of comments, and if the recommendation is no cap or 15 or whatever it is, we can make the edit. But what it sounds like I'm hearing from artists is that they want to be funded to do their art. And some of them want to be nonprofits and expanded and all of that, but others are looking for funding to do that art. And so is there another way to think of this that isn't fiscal sponsorship, but just hiring them as part of a project?
I think what we're seeing though is a lot of the applicants are coming with their own project and then coming to see where they can fit in to apply to get their project funded. It's not coming from the nonprofit that would be the direct applicant.
Right, and so it's really partnering with that nonprofit to submit a project. And I think we keep saying fiscal sponsorship, but I hear the artists saying that they want to be funded to do projects and work. And I don't know if fiscally sponsoring them, like kind of as a pass-through, is exactly what we're getting at here, because we're supposed to fund nonprofits. And so it feels like that's what the ordinance says, right? But
we can't really mess too much with.
You're right, but by saying that we're fiscally sponsoring 40 organizations that are not nonprofits as kind of a workaround, that gets kind of complicated too. And so is there a way to get the money to do those great projects without calling it fiscal sponsorship, more of partnering with an organization to fund that work? It's just a question.
It's very tricky, but the ordinance doesn't call for that. We have to fund nonprofits. So if an organization or a nonprofit want to subcontract with an artist,
that's what I'm saying,
project,
rather than
yes,
calling it fiscal sponsorship, because you may never intend to be a nonprofit, but if I'm,
But if the ordinance calls for you to be a nonprofit in order for you to be funded,
you need a
and
nonprofit.
if you want to receive funding from the portion of Measure P for the arts component, then you have to be a nonprofit.
You're right.
Or you have to be subcontracted with a sponsorship, a fiscal sponsorship, or however it may go.
Or just a subcontractor as part of a project. So I think, like, if you want to have access to money over the long term, creating a nonprofit is the route to go. But if you're wanting to get money to do projects, partnering with a nonprofit to fund a project of which you're a contractor is still the intent, because the nonprofit's receiving the funding. So what am I missing about fiscal sponsorship?
I have a concern with that, right?
Sure.
So you would basically be asking the nonprofit to be the direct applicant, but elsewhere in these guidelines, we're saying each nonprofit can only apply for one project or one operating.
Unless we edit that right now.
So if we change it and say you could apply for lots of projects, but they have to be accomplishing different things, or
I mean, we're making the guidelines, so that's why I'm asking now, because if that was another route, because we keep hearing the fiscal sponsorship, but then we're also hearing, I have like a $10,000 project that I'd like to paint a mural. That doesn't necessarily, like, how can they partner? And should there be, you'll see in the rubric where I added points for hiring local artists. I'm recommending that. Maybe not. I don't know. We'll see what you all recommend. But should we think about a solution that would still expand access, but it's the fiscal sponsorship that I think is getting, it's complicated, because are you acting only as a financial arm, or are you equipping them to become a nonprofit?
But who are we to say if they're going to fiscal sponsor a nonprofit who hasn't been established? That's what they're going to do. Who are we to say if it's just a pass-through or not? We don't know, right? But in order for us to be able to fund the art community, you just can't put a cap on how many people that an organization can be a fiscal sponsor for.
Okay.
I just don't see that. And I hear the cry of the local artists. Yes, they may have $10,000 to do a mural, but then that's where you go partner up with someone like the Tower Neighborhood Committee, right? And to go do your mural in Tower. And then ask, can that be written in their proposal?
Well, and that's what I was going to say.
So
is
I like that. I don't have any reservations about it.
Whether you call it fiscal sponsorship or you call it contracted work as part of an overall project to do murals citywide, either way, you're getting funding. But I think the fiscal sponsorship component, that may be perfect for those starting nonprofits, but there may be some other ways to to award grants to nonprofits as part of
But if
maybe
we're
a
going to
collective
play
effort.
with all that, we might as well play with the timeline as well.
You know I didn't set the June 30th, right?
I know you didn't, and I'm sorry that it's actually
I'll
being
take all the
directed to
comments.
you. I wish the person who did sit it here can hear that, because I don't have a problem saying that.
That's
but if we're going to try to play with the language, we might as well play with all the language.
Well, I just threw it into the universe, but to come back to page 13, because I realize we're at 7:40 and we're probably going to get spicier as the night goes on, right? But what I'm hearing is that you would recommend no cap. Got it.
I
All right.
would.
Shall we go to page 14? Or are there any
Yes.
other comments?
I don't have any other comments.
I would say that Kim and I both have the position of no cap. You know, that's in my public comment that was submitted in the chart, and Chair McCoy has made that position clear multiple times here as well.
All right. So on page 14, the artist's commitment, there were comments saying that that can be challenging to do ahead of time, and they don't have artists already, like that was used in the past to maybe limit access or something. And so what I did was add language that if you haven't selected the artists at the time of application, then you wouldn't need to have the artist commitment. But what I just was intending here was that if you have not yet contacted an artist, please do not use their name in your proposal and commit them personally by name to doing a project they didn't agree to. But if you want to just say artist to be selected, that's fine.
I'm good with that.
Okay. Page 14, later on the bottom there, we did get a lot of comments about removing the numbers. So I took out all the numbers representation-wise as far as minimum representation. So those are struck through with the red lines. And then added clarifying language as best I could with the comments that we had received, looking for members with experience in arts, which may include formal education or lived experience, or artists that are working artists or practiced artists. So you wouldn't necessarily have to have a degree in fine arts, but you could also be a working artist to represent. And then the cultural practitioners expanded that to include cultural bearers reflective of the demographic diversity in Fresno. On page 15, we clarified examples of, university professors or technical instructors even. So maybe they wouldn't necessarily be, at a 4-year university, but if they have experience in arts or cultural education in some capacity. And then for the youth and seniors, just expanding that to say that we would be looking for a wide range of generational perspectives, including representation from both youth and seniors. Accessibility, there were questions on what that meant, so I gave some examples. May include experience working with individuals who are disabled, lived experience with a disability, or familiarity with facility or program improvements that can increase accessibility and expand access, because again, that came through in the cultural arts plan. We struck out the language that said specifically highest needs neighborhoods and made it more flexible. I think Chair McCoy, that was one of the comments from one of the early meetings, that members residing in diverse neighborhoods throughout the city, including but not limited to highest needs, really just looking for a wide representation. So hopefully that gets at what you were looking for. And then there were a lot of comments about not including anyone from outside of Fresno. We did remove the total number. Staff are still recommending that option to support the recusal process, just in case there's a situation where, everyone is so connected. But I do welcome your feedback there, whether you recommend excluding that, whether you think we should have the number there in that case. And this is with having some presence of a scoring member or members from outside of the city of Fresno to support for conflict recusal if deemed necessary.
I thought that the recommendation around having individuals from the county of Fresno was helpful, since I think part of the concern was that perhaps viewpoints and perspectives might not reflect the city of Fresno if they weren't city of Fresno residents. However, the city is full of county islands, and there are a lot of individuals also who reside outside of the city limits in the county of Fresno who are very involved in the arts and culture work that's done within the city.
No, wait, yeah. Could you feel me looking?
Yeah, I felt you staring me down. I'm not in favor of having anyone from outside of Fresno coming in. I think we're well equipped to handle it. That's just my opinion.
So collectively, would you all recommend changing the wording, striking it? What would you like us to do?
Striking outside, striking it. I don't think we need anyone from outside of Fresno coming in into this process unless they're going to take over this process. But I think we have well-equipped nonprofits that would be able to fill the role of the Fresno Arts Council that they were playing. But that's a whole nother conversation, so I'm totally against.
My recommendation would be to bring to the full commission consideration of maybe County of Fresno or County of Fresno within the city limits, if that is more helpful, for the purpose of the conflict or recusal support.
I don't have a problem with that.
You good with that? Okay. So I'll put a comment on the draft that we send for the 18th. And I'm sorry that you have to hear me for so long, but I plan to do the same thing with the whole prac. So we're going to bring snacks, and we'll have snacks for you too.
Lots of snacks.
I know.
Lots of coffee.
I need water that's bigger than like a little guy here, but we're all right. Okay. So then we also got a lot of really helpful feedback and some concern that we wouldn't be getting like a diverse panel. And so I listed here some of the methods that we would plan to use to promote. And if there's other methods that you would like to see included, we would send it out to our distribution list, ask to do media releases, because I think if the city does a media release, tends to get some news coverage, which can be helpful. Printed flyers at all of our community centers. We can also work with our staff to help promote it, because they have done a really good job with promoting opportunities that people may not otherwise hear about. Canvassing at Art Hop, but also other large events, because I know we got some feedback not to just focus only on downtown, but to focus more citywide on different events. Also outreaching to our program participants. We have a very active senior program. I want to say 1,200 or so different seniors, so advertising with them. And then we get a huge turnout for movie nights, so that's a good place to also spread the word. Those are held citywide. Sharing flyers with nonprofits, elected officials, the Office of Community Affairs, and then Peach Jar. Fresno Unified uses that to get flyers out to parents. Sharing, obviously, with you all on the commission so that you can share with your networks. And then distributing maybe to local universities, too, via email or even posting up on the message boards, because, students might be standing around and catch the message. So those are some of the tools we used when we did cultural arts plan outreach. If there are other things that are missing, we're certainly open to that. But that we would hope would help us to get a more diverse panel. And then going to training and compensation, I know that we discussed at a prior meeting compensating a total of $500. In the comments that we'll go over this evening for scoring, we did get some feedback about like a different range of funding. I know that there's some opinion that compensation shouldn't be included, but I think staff are recommending that we do pay the scoring committee, and the reason for that is we really need them to complete the task at hand, and we realize that taking that level of time and attention can incur a cost to attend things and maybe not take a shift at work so that you have the time to do it. So we recommended the $500. I know that there's not necessarily agreement on that, but if you're okay with us considering it, we'd like to leave that in there. And then clarification that unconscious bias is often referred to as implicit, so that's just a minor detail there. And then the orientation on fair and impartial grant application review, we would include at a minimum the review of the rubrics, examples, hand-on practice to build comfort with the review process so that scorers who maybe have never done it before might be able to get comfortable with the materials. Any comments on page 15? Okay. They get a little easier as we go. The harder stuff, I think we've been
You know I've been through this whole packet.
I know. Page 16, just that the conflict of interest disclosure would apply to PrAC and then also City of Fresno staff. So that was a comment we got and we wanted to add.
I did have a question on that one. Would you be letting the commission members know sooner in the process who the applicants are? Because I know that with the last round, Commissioner Keglia and I, both, recused ourselves from voting. In part, I think we were surprised. I had a Sikh mental health provider client that was an applicant that I was not aware of, and for Commissioner Keglia, she wasn't aware that one of the projects that was funded was about her family's history. So if we're going to be asked to make conflict of interest disclosures, can we be made aware of who it is sooner?
Yeah, and I think with publishing the notice of intent to award, that should include a description of the project, so you'd have a better idea of what the scope is to try to identify if you might have a conflict. Same for staff. So in the timeline, we account for that 10-day notice, so I think that we could work on getting that to you. Okay, with the rubric, no changes on page 17, and then on page 18, I did add an item there to support Fresno's artists and cultural practitioners, if you would get more points in your proposal if you included them. This was to try to address, artists wishing to, be funded. What are your thoughts on including it? Would you like to see it removed, rewritten?
I don't have a problem with it. People do it all the time. If you are doing this, you get extra this. I don't have a problem with that. I probably get beat up by the community for saying that, but I don't have a problem with it.
I thought it was
I'm fine with it.
Okay, so we'll leave that as is. No changes on page 19 or 20. And then on page 21, that same scoring was added to the rubric for the second rubric. And then the questions and technical assistance, we just added some clarifying language about how to apply grant writing examples and tips, how to reference the cultural arts plan for those who might not be used to navigating it, how to develop a budget, and other relevant topics. So just putting an example, we're not limited to those, but thought that could be helpful to clarify because budgets came up quite a bit in comments. And then on page 22 in the appeals section, there were questions about us defining what grounds for appeal would be, and I'm frankly not sure how to state this, but you can appeal for any reason whatsoever. So grounds was maybe not the best word. We put description of the reason. So I'm appealing because I don't like it, or I'm appealing because I don't know, for whatever reason. But I just wanted to be very clear that appeals would be scheduled throughout the process and that you could appeal for whatever reason you felt you wanted to, which is more flexible than the prior round. Regulated communications, there was a question about this language applying to PrAC commissioners, so I've submitted that for legal advisement. The post-award requirements, specifically payment terms, public comments are indicating that the 10% hold is challenging for some. There's comments that requested 100% upfront. There are some that asked for 90-10 for projects, they requested 100% for projects and then 90-10 for quarterly payments. There was no consensus, and we are working to identify what that will look like so that we can ensure and balance prompt payment with public accountability. I think that I'm actually really surprised by how much spending from the prior round occurred without receiving any grant funds. I think because there was, the urgency to get the work done by the June 30th deadline. So. But then in that case, they're left with that reimbursement basis. And for some, it's easier than others. So we're still working through those terms, and there wasn't consensus. I don't know if you all have any impact or feedback on what those terms might look like.
I just noted that it was like TBD, the payment terms. Is that something that is going to be the staff suggestion will be brought at the meeting on the 18th?
Yeah, but I just wanted to see if there was any thoughts.
I don't know. In my public comment, I think I put that it's possible project grants might need a different funding cadence than an operational support grant, just depending on what the purpose of the funding is. But I don't know. I guess I'm looking forward to seeing what is proposed.
Okay. So we'll include a proposal for the PROC meeting on the 18th. On page 23, the owner permission would be required post-award. So what we're asking for when applying is just a letter that, hey, as owner of this property, I agree in concept, but we realize that you would need grant funding post-award to then go ahead and get like the actual permits or things that have expenses associated with it. So post-award was added to try to clarify that. And then the itemized invoices for payment requests. The way that it's currently set up kind of on the back end is that you would submit an invoice requesting that upfront payment, but expenditure reports for how you use that payment would be required so that we could tie the expenses to what was funded. And then payments are for actual costs incurred and must be substantiated. So because it is public funding, receipts and invoices and things like that are going to be required. And so if you finish your project and it was cheaper than what you thought it would be, you wouldn't necessarily be entitled to all of those remaining funds if there were no expenses associated with it. If that makes sense. Any questions on that? Okay. And then the grantee must share information related to Measure P funded events or programs with the city or designee, so the information will be placed on a centralized calendar. There were a lot of comments asking for where can we like promote everything that we're doing with these dollars. So we wanted to include that as a post-award requirement. And then there was something that we had flagged about based on some comments that we saw about disposition of equipment or resale of equipment purchased with grant funds. I think mostly those comments were related to construction, but like paying with grant money for this excellent improvement and then just selling it. Right, so it's complicated, but we'll figure out those post-award requirements in the contracting phase, but there will be requirements so that it's not, you apply for the same sound system every year and then just sell it. I'm not saying that anyone's gonna do that, but there should be some disbursement or there should be some rules around that because the city has some disposition requirements as well. Okay, page 24, no edits. Page 20.
Can I give you my comment on page 23? It was about the progress reporting. So I think that it was like universally acknowledged that a lot of the awardees felt the reporting wasn't meaningful, especially when they were required to submit reports before they received any funding. And one of the listening sessions, somebody had mentioned that doing the reporting helped them identify issues that they could then troubleshoot. I don't know that that necessarily needs to be done through a quarterly reporting process, but maybe there should be some periodic opportunities for the awardees to review, are they meeting their goals? And if not, who do they talk to, or how can they get ideas on how they can better reach, the audiences that their award was intended to reach if that's not something that they are achieving during the implementation, but before it's over.
Yeah, and we don't want to require reporting just for reporting's sake, and numbers that you report quarterly, while useful in narrative form, become complicated because then if you accidentally include the same people in quarter 2 and quarter 3, and so really like the total reach would be reported as part of the total final report. But what we were looking for more so there was just progress toward delivering on the project and identifying challenges early. One of the questions that we would be including would ask, like, are you having any challenges? And that's an opportunity for them to say, yes, I am, and here's why, and if there's anything that we can do to try to support or better understand. So we don't want to have, like, useless reporting. And I heard, people would prefer to do maybe twice a year. But I do think that quarterly reporting is a helpful tool to try to triage early. And so we would like to include it just to help us make sure that, things are happening.
I like it.
Okay.
I don't have a problem with it.
But we can make sure that we're intentional about what we include. Got it.
Exactly.
Okay.
If the project hasn't stopped it yet, it can just simply put nothing to report yet, start date is such and such. Next report, then they can report out.
Agreed.
It also helps to keep a record in a paper trail. So I like the quarterly reporting progress myself.
Thank you for that feedback. And we, again, earlier in the guidelines, we said don't start work before you receive funding, because then you're also not reporting before you receive funding. So that will work itself out. Okay. Any other questions on that page? We're almost there, you guys, and then we just have one more that's shorter, I promise. I know it's late. Page 24, no edits. And then page 25, we added some definitions, the annual total revenue. There's different tax ways to look that up, and I think with your recommendation, we'll edit those who maybe don't have those returns to qualify under that lower tier. Culture. I did not attempt to define it because it is so unique to everyone's lived experience. The Culture Arts Plan does speak to a general definition, but they too, even experts in the field, did not attempt to put it on, a few sentences. So I did reference it there. You're welcome to look at that, but I would not do the community a disservice to try to narrow it down. Reasonable and necessary, tried to include some additional language. I think, Chair McCoy, that was one of the questions you had, but generally it means that the expense is directly tied to expanding access, consistent with market rates for goods or services, and appropriate for the people being served, like the number of people. So if you're spending $50,000 to serve 2 people a dinner, then that would not be reasonable or necessary to complete the scope of work. And then youth and sphere of influence I mentioned earlier. Any other comments or edits that you'd like to see within this document? I think I have some feedback to turn around for our next PAC meeting. Yes, let's take a quick, you want to call a break?
Yes, I need to take a 5-minute break really quick, and we'll be back at 8:07. Okay, next item, right? All right. We're gonna go to our last discussion item of the night, ID number 26-620. Discussion on the Draft Application Review Committee, ARC Handbook for EAAC Cycle 3 Comment Review. Will someone from the Parks Department please begin the presentation?
All right, me again, Shelby McNabb, Assistant Director. There's a supplemental copy in the back for those who are here in person, and we will be publishing that tomorrow for those who are available online, but we do have on the screen that version so you can follow along. This handbook is intended to guide the scoring process. We reviewed it at the last subcommittee meeting, and comments were taken at that meeting, and as well as through an open portal that was open through the 8th. A lot of what's in here was shaped by listening sessions. Even though the document hadn't been produced yet, there were a lot of comments related to scoring and just comments that we have heard throughout the cycles as we have attended PRAC and listened to the community. We did receive 11 comments specifically in writing on the handbook, and so I'll flip through to show the edits that were made from our last meeting. There's just a handful of them. So if you should have the supplement there in front of you with the red lines. Clerk, are you broadcasting the edited one, the supplemental one, or the... Okay, so this one doesn't have a red line, so I'll just read them through. Okay, sorry about that, people online. Yes, Sarah, let's get a copy of you.
Please,
yep, sorry. What you will see, though, just for the public, there is the original copy, the draft of the handbook, and then a copy of all of the comments that were received. So what I'm going over tonight is how we folded those in, and then we'll publish that document.
Thank you. So
on page 3 of the draft, allow you a minute to get over there. I'm just going to skip past the table of contents because that's... on page 3, there was a question about, at our last meeting, about having the appeals being heard by a subcommittee versus the full PRAC. So we will submit for legal advisement as to whether a subcommittee could conduct that work. Certainly that would need to be formed through the resolution process if so we will ask that. And then there was a comment that requested compensation of $16.90 per hour or somewhere in the range between $700 to $1,000 for the ARC members for their time. For both of those comments here on page 3, would you like to see, the first one is just legal in nature, so we'll get that clarification, but for the second comment about compensation, do you recommend paying more than $500? No? Okay, so we'll leave it at $500 as currently drafted, but I did want to reflect that comment. So on page 4, the application and selection, there was a comment related to on number 3, not being a board member, officer, executive director, or staff of an applicant organization or fiscally sponsored organization that are applying for funding and being on the scoring committee. I did add in the term executive director just because they are an officer and I felt that's a position people can recognize, but the comment was added in there just to add clarifying language. Any feedback on page 4? No?
Would the commission have a say-so in the selection?
That question is with legal.
Okay. Did you ask already?
I did, and I'm waiting a response.
Okay.
There's a turnaround time, but I know that you had expressed interest in being part of that process, and I think we just want to get clarification on that, so submit it. Yeah.
Thank you.
And if I don't have I'm hoping to get, I have lots of questions, obviously. I'm hoping to get responses by the 18th, but if I don't, we can always provide that to you via trade memo.
I just think if we're recommending that appeals come through subcommittee, then we should be able to have a say-so in picking the scores or the panelists.
Yeah, and I can see that would offer more flexibility, but then also like the community's feedback has been to have standing committees like this so that they can see the appeals happening, and so doing it as part of the main prac allows for that built-in time, but we'll find out the legal opinions that you had asked about.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions on page 4? Okay, no edits to page 5. On page 6, there was a comment related to the thought that we may need more than 30 members. So I just added language there on number 5 that parks may increase the total number of members above 30 and or reduce the number of reviewers to 3 if let's say we get 400 applications. The trigger is 150 applications or other things that are listed there, but I just did add that flexibility in if we think we would need more scores. And then on page 7, there was a comment that indicated that the name of the applicant and fiscal sponsor should be redacted for conflict review purposes, and only the applicant, contact person, and info need to be redacted. What level of redaction do you all recommend? Or put another way, would you like me to leave the language the same or try to incorporate that comment?
Like we're both like really thinking hard here.
We had included the redaction to give a little bit more anonymity, but
what community?
I think they're saying that it should be disclosed just for the purpose of conflict checking.
When we go to the actual comment,
Stephen. Okay. I mean, that's. I guess
so
I
it just
don't
says
really understand the purpose.
The name of the applicant and fiscal sponsor should not be redacted for conflict review purposes. So I think, yes, maybe for conflict checking.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I'm fine.
So I'll make edits. The later it gets, the harder it gets for trying to tie it in, but thank you. Okay. Page 8, no edits were made. Page 9, the clarifying questions, we incorporated a comment to ensure a competitive process. Questions shall be limited to clarifying in nature and shall not provide an opportunity, I missed a word there, to substantively change a response. So word counts shall be limited to ensure clarifying questions and answers are focused, and examples will be provided as part of training. So I do need to add a word there too, but essentially asking a clarifying question wouldn't be seen as an opportunity to then like completely rewrite your proposal, and it would be more so clarifying in nature, you know, how many kids did you say you were serving? That's the type of clarifying question, and they say 15. But saying, could you elaborate more on the benefits of your proposal as it relates to the children? So that would not be maybe a fair clarifying question.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, and one of the listening sessions, I think either somebody discussed or it was discussed by the person hosting that table that it might be appropriate to ask somebody what was the quantity they used when they gave a number, but not allow them really to go beyond anything kind of a technical clarification like that.
Yeah, so we will have to give some examples of what that looks like, but I think people can get the gist of that.
Examples will help.
Yeah. And then no changes, well, sorry. On the bottom of page 10, there is a change. There was a request rather than may make available a viewing location that we shall. So we're happy to include that and offer a viewing location. And then I also included language that all efforts will be made to host the viewing areas at a separate location. But in all cases, whether we have scoring in one room here and viewing in another, that those who are viewing should be mindful of that. And then on page 11, we got some questions about how we're going to handle the less than 100%. And I know we've kind of discussed that, and I'm going to propose something for us to react to on next Monday and get the input of the other commissioners as well. But the total amount awarded to each grantee, if there is like a percentage, would be in accordance with the grant guidelines and then brought before the commission via hearing to make recommendations to council. So I do think that as just part of our standard process, however the guidelines are drafted, this all comes before you to make recommendations. So even if it doesn't work out how we intend, right, by laying out the percentages and whatnot, it would still come before the commission for discussion. So, but I will prepare something to react to so that we don't stay here all night to go through it.
Okay.
All right. That concludes my presentation. Do you have any other questions on the handbook edits?
No, not at all.
All right.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to our hearing. ID number 26-622, hearing to receive public input on expanded access to arts and cultural grant program for Cycle 3 only. Would any member of the public like to make a comment regarding this item? You have up to 3 minutes, and I do have some cards up here. First person I'm going to call is Ome.
Hello. So we'll just get to the point. I want to speak in strong opposition to the proposed cap on fiscal sponsorship connected to arts and cultural funding. I understand the city is raising concerns around accountability and administrative responsibility, but I need to ask what analysis has actually been done regarding the number of BIPOC-led, LGBTQ-led, trans-led, immigrant-led, or working class organizations in Fresno that currently have the operational capacity, cultural competency, and willingness to serve as a fiscal sponsor. Because from where many of us stand, this proposal does not exist in a vacuum. This policy will disproportionately impact communities that are already underfunded, underrepresented, and structurally excluded from traditional systems of philanthropy and institutional support. And many of us see this as systematic oppression playing out in real time. Fiscal sponsorship is not just paperwork or accounting. It is relational, it is cultural, it is built on trust, shared lived experience, language access, and community accountability. The assumption that emerging grassroots projects can simply find another sponsor completely ignores the reality of how marginalized communities survive. Not every nonprofit is a culturally aligned or safe for BIPOC, queer, trans, immigrant, or undocumented communities to partner with. Not every organization understands the lived experiences of the communities they claim to serve. Many emerging artists and organizers intentionally seek out sponsors that are culturally congruent because historically they have experienced exclusion, tokenization, discrimination, or harm within mainstream institutions. So when organizations like Dulce Upfront are limited in their ability to fiscally sponsor projects, the city is not simply limiting administrative capacity. It is limiting access, representation, safety, and opportunity for entire communities. And the impact will not be felt equally. Organizations with established wealth, institutional leadership, relationships, staffing, and traditional nonprofit structures will continue to survive. Meanwhile, emerging grassroots projects, especially projects led by queer, trans, and immigrant communities of color, will face even greater barriers to accessing public resources. That is what classism looks like. That's what systemic racism looks like. That's what structural homophobia and transphobia look like. in policy, even when the language itself appears neutral, because policies do not have to explicitly target marginalized people in order to disproportionately harm them. I also want to challenge the idea that fiscal sponsorship can be reduced to a cookie-cutter model. Different fiscal sponsors serve different ecosystems and communities. I'll stop there.
Next speaker, Samuel Contreras.
Hello everyone, so my name is Samuel Contreras. I'm a filmmaker and a professor at Fresno State, and also want to just echo the words of Ome as well, in which I feel there should not be any cap when it comes to organizations being fiscal sponsors. I was really fortunate that I've been guided to start my own nonprofit, but I also recognize my privilege and the fact, for instance, that I have a little bit more of income or money to put into making the organization. It was a process, it's money, and like I said, I'm really fortunate that I do have the resources, the capability of making it go through, but there's a lot of artists that they do not have, the capacity or the money to start their own nonprofits. So it's just saying, eventually artists who start their own nonprofit, I think it's out of touch, because like I said, a lot of artists, specifically emerging artists, do not have the capability to do that. As I went through the process, it's not an easy one. It's a lot of legal terminology. There is a lot of time invested, money invested, so it's not as easy. And so as we put a cap into other nonprofits to business sponsors, it will also put a cap also in projects being developed as well too. And the city has not provided any type of alternative as well to get any sort of fiscal sponsorship too. I just want to have the city to have that in mind, to keep, it's not an easy process just to start your nonprofit. And again, so I will definitely encourage the city not to put any limit caps on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Stephen Wilson.
Good evening. I wanted to talk primarily about the funding allocation section of the grant guidelines. I think the cap of $150,000 for general operating support is too low to achieve the important goal of the ordinance of fiscal sustainability. I think it's important to take the arts sector in Fresno as it actually exists. In cycle 2, almost half of the general operating grant applicants had budgets of over $1 million. And so that is a substantial number of the applicants. Also in cycle 2, the cap was $400,000, so $150,000 is a substantial reduction. So I do think that should be looked at. Regarding the general conversation about the tiers and the tiers for both project and general operating grants, I think it might be more clarifying if that was all framed in terms of expenses rather than revenues. I think the most important number for a project grant application is the cost of the project, not the revenue of the applicant. And similarly, with general operating grants, the expenses of the organization represent the activity that they are doing in Fresno. And so I think that the confusion around those tiers and how to sort through it, it might be more simplified if you framed things in terms of expenses rather than revenues. So that's just a suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Michelle.
Thank you for giving us a voice. I know this is a working meeting between the subcommittee and the city, so I appreciate the moment, the 3 minutes I have. I too, like Stephen, want to concentrate on page 7 and the cap that has been given organizations with over $1 million in budgets. $150,000 does not reflect the ordinance, which states that it will support and stabilize cultural arts organizations, both established and emerging in the city of Fresno, that support the cultural plan. The cultural plan had to be written and passed before the Measure P was ever put into place and the first guidelines were ever created. So as I've been watching this new process with the city taking over, I kept saying to myself, well, what can I apply for? What is my cap? What are the requirements for me as an organization which is not wealthy? We are actually struggling, and we always have struggled, which is why raising $100,000 a month is difficult in this city, and why this Measure P money is such a help to us. And at $150,000, you're basically giving me a month and a half of income to support an organization that requires me to keep it open 7 days a week at $100,000 a month. So as you look at these caps for the organizations, I wish in some ways you go back to established and emerging for both projects and general operating. Look at our budgets and give us a portion of it to apply for. We know we're not going to get all of it. First round, we had both project and general operating. Second cycle, we could choose between the two, and we applied for 400 and got 240. So we adjusted our budget and we found the money elsewhere. But at least we had something that we could rely on and gave us a sense of continuity and belief that we were going to make it for the next 77 years. You know, and that's really important to us, that the city of Fresno reaps the benefit of these organizations many, many years beyond those of us who are running them right now and have run them in the past. So thank you.
Thank you. Any more cards? No. Do I have anyone online? Are you coming up? Okay. Oh. Hurry, hurry, hurry.
South Tower Community Land Trust. Had a couple comments. One, for smaller organizations, some of the budget caps have a bigger impact. So for us, example, when we started, we did get a large grant to cover our first 2 years of operations. And so our revenue for 24 was above the 1 million, but our revenue for 25 would be below it. So there's some of those things year to year that I think could use some specific look at, if, you know, that could be helpful. Also, in the timeline for how I see this, I know that we want the community part to be expanded and have more time to process this, but the city's part of this, you know, in the 13-month process is very long, and I don't know if there's ways for that to be compressed, especially as you're proposing a project with a set of artists. You know, 13 months later, costs have gone up, the artist might not be available, and there's a lot of impacts that putting in our proposals in September versus getting funding, you know, months later, has big impact. And I've experienced that with other City of Fresno grants. We applied for one in August of last year, and we're now getting the award and having to really struggle to make sure that we're still meeting what was proposed back in August. On partial funding, I don't think projects should receive partial funding because we want to encourage people to really design good projects. And receiving partial funding can affect the impact of that. Partial funding for general ops is a different scenario because it's the whole organization, and I think there's more flexibility there. So I'd encourage that rather than doing partial funding for projects. We received partial funding for 2 projects, and it was an onerous process because both times we had to redesign what our proposal was, so it added time to that administrative portion for a smaller impact. And then on the NTE code, as far as being eligible for general operating support, would encourage against some more specific language, because I saw last rounds different organizations find workarounds for how to have the right eligibility, but that was not openly published. So some organizations were able to find a workaround that were not shared with everybody. So not everybody that wanted to be, eligible for general operating was, because some people had special workarounds. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Ariana Chavez.
My name is Ariana Chavez. I'm the executive director at Arte Americas, and just wanted to take the moment to thank you for the thoughtful consideration of the details of this next cycle. And I do have some concerns, just as the leader of an organization, of the largest and oldest Latina arts organization in the Central Valley. My primary concern is surrounding the cap on the total dollar amount that larger perceived established organizations are eligible to receive. And I do just want to pose the question generally. I appreciate the need for emerging organizations that are just starting out, to be able to receive funding. And Arte Americas wouldn't be here if we didn't find a way 39 years ago to get things going, right? And we were created to create a counter-narrative to attempt to undo a lot of the harm that is done by the media, the messaging that we receive about what it means to be Latino in the United States. And so my question really is in terms of what we hope to build and what we're leading folks to. And I want to really just ask everyone to consider what the goal is. If you are growing an organization and you hope to become an established organization someday, how do we want our established organizations to look, and how do we want our established organizations to be able to serve our communities? I'm really appreciative of that question that was brought up about moving beyond this fiscal receiver relationship. I have no problem with an open number there. I'm not fighting with anyone, but I am here to fight for Arte Americas. And I really think that we need to consider opportunities to give our organizations the funds that they need to survive, to exist, and to be able to be held accountable in serving our communities and working with artists that accurately represent us as a community. I also do quickly want to share that I had a conversation with a national funder who's been keeping an eye on what's going on here. And so just to assuage any concerns that maybe we're moving too fast, they told me that they're pausing all funding in the city of Fresno until they see some movement with Measure P and they see that Fresno's got its stuff together. So I just wanted to share that and thank everyone for their thought and time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Andrea.
Hi, I'm Andrea Mell, Interim Executive Director at Fresno Arts Council. Thank you all so much for the presentation and for walking us so carefully through all of the guidelines. I really only have a clarifying couple of questions with potentially a request to include those clarifications in the guidelines in a proposed revision. So one is a question, they're on page 7, the funding table. For general operating support, specifically for the organizations who have a budget between $0 and $50,000, the maximum funding request, and really for all of these organizations, is listed there. However, there's nothing that I can see that's explicitly mentioning the amount that you're eligible for. In the past, it's been up to 100% of your operating budget or your total revenue, and just want that to be clarified whether that's the case, or if an organization, say with a $25,000 budget, could still request up to $50,000. And then additionally, how is that revenue determined? I know we were provided the IRS link, but certain organizations may function as a pass-through or a grantor, and several are functioning as fiscal sponsors. In next cycles, will that revenue be included as part of their budget, or will there be a question potentially in the application to note the amount of pass-through funds that your organization is managing, and would that then impact the maximum funding amount that you could request? So, thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone online?
Yes. First, I have Johannes. Please unmute yourself when you're ready.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, subcommittee. I'm going to read line items on the draft guidelines. Page 6, comment SM11. I strongly support the $150,000 ceiling, but there must be more flexibility for the lower amounts than just a rigid revenue calculation. The most common problem faced by emerging orgs is lack of revenue to report. Not lack of correct reporting, but literally they just pay out of their own pocket or they do it for free. This current system will punish smaller orgs and honestly even medium orgs. Page 7, comment SM12. Again, I strongly support the $150,000 ceiling. Last year's maximum of $400,000 was disgusting and was deliberately set up so just 13 established orgs could slurp up all the money away from emerging orgs. This grant should be seed money for growing emerging orgs, specifically not a windfall for orgs with over $1 million annual budget. Page 8, comment SM15. I support matching fiscal sponsors to artists, but there'd better be more than just 2 meet and greets, and there must be more than just this. The city must campaign for more fiscal sponsors, not just invite them, but campaign and recruit more of them. Page 13, regarding fiscal sponsors cap of the five grantees and no more than the total of $150,000 in grant funding. Absolutely not. Once again, you're proving how much this process is being rushed, half-baked, and frankly begging for a discrimination lawsuit. Please listen to everything OME said in their public comment, but also this dollar amount cap puts an undue burden on a fiscal sponsor and 5 independent applicants, who I guess are supposed to somehow coordinate each of their application budgets. And this is a trap that will disqualify all 5 applications if they accidentally collectively go over the $150K total. It's absurd. Page 8, comment SM17. I strongly support 90 days to apply as the bare minimum for an application of this size. Page 11, comment SM26. I strongly recommend costs like legal fees, accounting, and filing fees be included. It fits solidly within budget categories like overhead costs and bookkeeping costs that were allowed before. And also, the fiscal sponsor goes on and on about creating sustainability. This is what's needed to create a nonprofit. Page 11, comment SM30. There must be more flexibility in how orgs applying and fiscal sponsors qualify as an arts and culture category nonprofit, like the NTEE. This would not violate the Measure P ordinance to make it more flexible. The point is, emerging orgs, not establishing orgs, but emerging orgs are always mixed medium and mix their art into other services for the community. Art for art's sake was a racist and classist weapon used by Fresno Arts Council, so just 13 established orgs could slurp up all the money away from emerging orgs. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Next, I have Kenisha. Please unmute yourself when you're ready.
Hello, I'm Kenisha Daly with All Things Fresno. It's a community and culture page that highlights artists, entrepreneurs, and community leaders. And so one of that role is me being a community organizer. So I've been watching Measure P since cycle 1. I wasn't able to participate because I wasn't a fiscal sponsor. But the second cycle, I was finally able to participate thanks to Dual Say Upfront. And I was awarded my grant. I was one of the 30 percenters, which was, that's a whole other topic. But I do want to first speak to just my professional growth through this process from having OME as my mentor and my fiscal sponsor, and how they've helped me develop to serve my community better, and how I'm able to extend that then to the artists that I work with. When it comes to cycle 3, I do just want to reiterate how it is important that we do not have a cap when it comes to fiscal sponsors, because that will limit our access for everybody, including myself. So that's going to affect smaller artists. There's going to be artists of color and artists in the highest area of need. So they don't have grant writers, they have me. And so that's something I'm willing to take on. Another thing that I'm really unsatisfied with seeing is the eligibility, the language saying that it has to be a nonprofit, but it doesn't really speak to emerging artists or emerging projects. So if someone who didn't know that that was an option were to read this, who didn't have access to a nonprofit, who didn't know that they could have a fiscal sponsor, they would immediately eliminate themselves. So that's again small artists, and that's going to be event organizers who maybe are just up and starting. And we had a whole conversation about this tends to be the most popular thing that artists are coming forward with. So we're seeing that there's a need that artists have. We see that the community is willing to help, and I think we should honor that. Instead of trying to adapt Fresno to fit this mold, we have to see how we can adapt what we're paying into to fit and honor the artists within our city. Thank you.
Next, I have Elizabeth. Please unmute yourself when you're ready.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for sitting through this meeting and all the work that's gone into that. I truly feel that I just must share some input on the proposed caps to general operating organizations. In round one, we could apply for up to $300,000 and also a project grant for up to $150,000. The Historical Society did both, and out of this project grant, recorded 46 oral histories, video oral histories for public use of people from across all parts of the city. In year two, we could apply for up to $400,000 for a project grant, and we applied for general operating funds, receiving a greatly reduced amount, but we still applied for 6 entities, which was up from 1 the first year, as their fiscal sponsor. If you refer to the ordinance, one of its chief goals was to stabilize those legacy organizations, such as the Society, who has been serving the Fresno area. We're the oldest registered nonprofit for over 107 years. What concerns me most with the reduced proposed cap is, one, I don't know how we'll be able to fiscally sponsor or mentor as many emerging projects as we would like to, which we were hoping to increase to 10 in year 3. 2, the stability referred to in the ordinance is non-existent. We were made to believe we could safely hire employees and expand services to the arts and culture communities with stable annual funding, even understanding, of course, that the amount would vary and it is a competitive process. And 3, most importantly, how can this be equity in any form when emerging organizations who we greatly support all over the community can apply for more than 100% of their budgets, and those long-standing entities with undisputedly the widest reach, which is the goal here, can only apply for maybe 6 or 7% of their operational budgets. Emerging projects are very important to us. That's why we continue to support them as fiscal sponsors in Southeast, Southwest, and Central Fresno. We want to be able to do that. We do this with mentorship, administration, and oversight. And as we've been told many times tonight and before, fiscal sponsorship should not be taken lightly. I, too, am not in favor of a cap of 5. No question. We always want these projects to be done correctly, and so that we can utilize our broad reach in the communities so that even the fiscal sponsored project.
Thank you. That is your time. Next, I have Munira. Please unmute yourself when you're ready.
My name is Munira Dinkani. I am a clinical social worker, artist, community advocate, and someone deeply passionate about healing through culture, creativity, and connection. As a two-spirited woman, growing up Muslim and being raised within multiple cultures, I learned early on the importance of identity, belonging, creating spaces where people feel seen, respected, and valued. Those experiences shaped who I am and this journey right here. I work at 3 R's THP, where I do meaningful cultural and healing-centered work with foster youth and justice-involved youth every single day. Our youth deserve opportunities that go beyond basic services. They deserve access to art, culture, music, and spaces that help them heal, connect, and feel proud to who they are. This is why the access to arts and culture funding is so important. When I first tried to apply for funding through nonprofit, I learned that despite the in-profit or categorization did not qualify us for certain arts and cultural opportunities. That was discouraging because this need is very real and our youth absolutely benefit from cultural aligned programming. But through the challenge, I was introduced to the organization like Dulce Up Front and the importance of a nonprofit fiscal sponsor. Having a fiscal sponsor allowed me as both a clinical social worker and an artist to continue pursuing this vision instead of giving up on it. It gave me the opportunity to learn this process hands-on, from a grant development to community outreach to collaboration, accountability, and event coordination, all while receiving mentorship and support. Through this experience, I've learned that fiscal sponsors are not just supporting projects, they're opening doors for grassroots leaders, emerging community organizers, artists, and helping professionals who are trying to create meaningful change. I am incredibly grateful for the opportunity to continue learning and creating healing-centered cultural events for the children and youth and families. And I highly recommend that we do not put a cap on fiscal sponsors and limit access to the people who are learning. If we're going to do anything, maybe we can do evaluations after and get feedback and then adjust from there. But for organizations that are doing their job, serving their people, and giving mentorship, I highly, highly beg of the committee not to put a cap on fiscal sponsors.
Thank you.
There is no one else on Zoom.
Okay, last card for the night. I might butcher this name up. I do apologize in advance. Sawazi? Oh. Yay. You have 3 minutes.
Alrighty. Hello, my name is Sahasawati Saksi. Thank you for your time, subcommittee. My comment today is on actually the current grant guideline draft. So when I went to Labyrinth Art Collective session regarding the previous grant guideline draft, we were assigned pages to analyze, my groups being pages 3 and 4, which I see no changes to in this current draft. Although this is just the overview and background for the entire document, there is a part that stood out to me in that although there is an emphasis on cultural art, it does not address cultural diversity of art here, emphasis on diversity. As iterated in previous sessions before, many project proposals that were centric around their specific communities and cultural practices were rejected. This leads me to pages 11 and 12 of the current guideline drafts of who would be an ineligible applicant and what is an ineligible expense. I do agree that organizations that are religious, political, or private foundations should be excluded. Where my concern lies, though, is in regard to LGBTQ organizations. In the Board of Supervisors meeting yesterday, Supervisor Bredefeld went on a tirade on how LGBTQ people are pushing a political agenda and trying to indoctrinate children, despite LGBTQ identities falling under a protected class in California law. Along with that, LGBTQ people and culture have existed for years that predate Bredefeld's birth and the Bible. Chair McCoy, I recall and understand that you want to be directly a part of the committee selection process, but there also needs to be language in the grant guidelines and the overview, vision, and criteria for eligible applicants that emphasize cultural diversity of art here so that the blunders of the Fresno Arts Council will not be repeated. And the frameworks don't rely on your presence alone specifically. And language that ensures that LGBTQ organizations, and to the extent other organizations of marginalized communities, will not be wrongfully targeted as political foundations, so that there's clearer and more equitable criteria in the evaluation process, and these frameworks prevent higher governing bodies from interfering and erasing the cultural diversity that exists here by claiming certain applicants to be political foundations. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now close public comment. All right, you guys hung in there with us, and I appreciate everything. I would like to adjourn the meeting at 8:51 in the memory of Dr. Francine Apuda, who is deeply missed. Thank you and good night.